Chapter 309. Since teacher Yuan Fei is so interested in my background, I naturally cannot disappoint teacher, right? Orochimaru said in his cold and hoarse voice to the 3 generations Hokage. Orochimaru also quickly made hand seals and finally put his palms together in front of his chest. Sandaime looked at Orochimaru's hand seals and naturally recognized what kind of ninjutsu Orochimaru was using. Then his eyes widened as he looked at Orochimaru angrily and said, You actually secretly practice this ninjutsu? How can you blaspheme the souls of the dead like this? Ha ha ha. Orochimaru completely ignored Yuan Fei's reaction. Instead, he chuckled a few times and coldly spat out the name of this ninjutsu. Ninjutsu. Edo Tensei. Let the Hokage of Wood Leaf gather here. The tiles on the roof seemed to have turned into a swamp at this moment, and in the ripples, 2 coffins slowly rose. One of the 2 coffins had the word 1, and the other one had the word 2 written on it. Combined with what Orochimaru said just now, the identity of these 2 people was already obvious. They are the founder of Wood Leaf, the first Hokage Senju Takuma and Hashirama's younger brother. The second Hokage of Wood Leaf, Senju Takuma. Crack. With a crisp sound, the lids of the 2 coffins were slowly opened, revealing the faces of the 2 Hokage of Wood Leaf. Unlike normal people, the faces of the people summoned by the Edo Tensei were pale, and there were some obvious cracks. The white part of their eyes had turned black, making people feel very uncomfortable. After a while, Senju Takuma and Tobirama finally opened their eyes and looked around. Senju Takuma didn't say anything, but Tobirama said, "This seems to be Wood Leaf and our appearance." Tobirama raised his hand and looked at it. Then he seemed to understand something and said, "We really reap what we sow." Back then, in order to increase Wood Leaf strength, I started researching Edo Tensei. But at that time, Big Brother stopped me and sealed up all the incomplete information. Who would have thought that someone would be able to complete the technique I left behind? Hearing his brother's words, Senju Takuma also said to Tobirama, "I told you to completely destroy these things, but you didn't listen. Now look at us, we're already dead, but we're still being dragged out." Hashirama himself had a lively temperament. He was obviously summoned by the Edo Tensei, but he didn't seem to care about his situation at all. Instead, he blamed his younger brother. Obviously, Tobirama has long been accustomed to his elder brother, so he directly chose to ignore his brother's blame. Instead, he looked at Yuan Fei standing opposite him and said with emotion, "Are you, Yuan Fei boy? It's been so many years. Have you become an old man?" Looking at Yuan Fei, who was obviously much older than himself and his elder brother, Tobirama also felt a lot of emotions for a while. Hearing his brother's words, Hashirama was also interested. He happily went to Tobirama's side and saw the old Sarutobi. "Oh, Yuan Fei boy, what's wrong with you? Is it because you've been too indulgent after getting married? You become so old." Hearing Hashirama's words, everyone on the roof was shocked. Even the gloomy Orochimaru's eyes and mouth twitched a little at this moment. Obviously, he had a hard time enduring it. This is the first Hokage? Looking at the familiar face engraved on the shadow rock of Wood Leaf, combined with the words of the 3 generations, Watergate naturally understood that the long-haired man opposite him is the first Hokage of Wood Leaf, Senju Takuma. But why is Watergate's heart so unwilling to admit it? "Orochimaru, don't you think that your means are a bit too dirty? These 2 are your seniors, your grandmasters. You disturb their rest just for your own selfish desires, causing their souls to be unable to rest in peace. How can you bear to do this?" The 3 generations ignored Watergate's question. Instead, they began to reprimand their disciples. His words were full of righteousness and were very reasonable. But Hashirama, who was standing next to Tobirama, muttered in his mouth, "Little Yuan Fei is really not cute anymore. Now he looks like a pedantic old man." Hey, he's already an old man, okay? Although what you said is not wrong. But what's with that subtle sense of inconsistency? There are a total of 5 Kage-level powerhouses present, and 4 of them intentionally or unintentionally ignored Hashirama. As for the remaining one, isn't it Hashirama? Even if he wants to ignore it, it's his own words. How can he ignore it? And Orochimaru seems to be tired of the situation of these people talking about their daily lives. He took out 2 kunai from his arms and put them into the heads of the 2 former Hokages. Everyone, I didn't bring you here to talk about daily life and see the changes of wood leaf. Since you're already here, it's better to listen to my orders. When Orochimaru took out 2 kunai, the several Hokages knew that a battle was inevitable, so they could only adjust their state. Watergate took off his Haori, and 3 generations also took off their white robes, revealing their black clothes. Little Yuan Fei, be careful. Hashirama suddenly shouted at 3 generations. At the same time, his hands were constantly forming hand seals, and a ninjutsu was completed in an instant. Wood release. World of trees descending. Trees began to take root and grow rapidly on the roof. The originally bare roof had turned into a sea of trees at this moment. But Hashirama didn't stop there. Instead, he continued to form hand seals to cast ninjutsu. Would release 10,000 things. The roof that was originally covered with trees suddenly had many thick roots emerging from the ground. These roots quickly attacked Watergate in 3 generations. Little Yuan Fei and the blonde boy next to him, don't be touched by these roots, otherwise it will cause a large loss of chakra. With Hashirama's warning, Watergate directly shot his special kunai at the blind spot of the roots, and with a flying Thunder God jutsu, he dodged the roots that were coming towards him. At the same time, the Sandaime summoned his summoned beast, the Ape Devil. In an instant, the Ape Devil transformed into a huge stick and waved it vigorously, breaking the roots that were attacking him one by one. Chapter 310. Seeing that Senju Takuma's attack didn't work, Tobirama directly stepped forward and quickly formed hand seals, forming a ninjutsu in an instant. Tobirama himself was a grandmaster of water release. Even in a place without water, he can fully display water release ninjutsu. And now, Tobirama was using his most representative ninjutsu water release, hard whirlpool water blade. In the palm of Tobirama's hand, a whirlpool of water has appeared, and as the chakra injected by Tobirama continued to increase, the whirlpool formed in the palm of Tobirama's hand also became bigger and bigger. Originally, the 3 generations have been using their taijutsu to block Senju Takuma's jutsu, but when the whirlpool in the palm of Tobirama's hand reached the size of a basketball, Yuan Fei discovered what kind of ninjutsu Tobirama was using. Watergate, quickly stop the ninjutsu that Nidaime is using. We must not let this ninjutsu accumulate. Otherwise, its lethality will be too great. When Watergate heard Yuan Fei shout, he also looked at Tobirama, who seemed to be silent since the beginning of the battle. The huge whirlpool in the palm of Tobirama's hand was naturally seen by Watergate. Especially the momentum coming from the whirlpool was even more difficult to ignore. Waving his left hand, a flying Thunder God kunai flew towards Senju Tobirama. It's actually my flying Thunder God jutsu. It seems that I have a successor, much better than my stupid brother. Tobirama just used hard whirlpool water blade under the control of the talisman to attack Orochimaru. Naturally, there was no way to warn Orochimaru, but now that he has been discovered, Orochimaru naturally lifted the talisman's restriction on Tobirama, allowing him to speak. Watergate naturally knew whose ninjutsu his flying Thunder God jutsu was. Now, facing Tobirama, if the quality of the Edo Tensei sacrifice was too poor, and he himself was forcibly controlled by Orochimaru against his will, and he didn't have the medium to use the flying Thunder God jutsu, the battle between Tobirama and Watergate would be 100 times more exciting than it is now. Blonde boy, since you know how to use the flying Thunder God jutsu, then you have the opportunity to break my hard whirlpool water blade. Insert the kunai with the space marked directly into the center of the hard whirlpool water blade, and then use the space transfer to directly separate the water formed by my chakra so that the hard whirlpool water blade can be broken without attacking. Watergate heard Tobirama's instructions, so naturally, he directly teleported the hard whirlpool water blade to a place where Tobirama couldn't sense it, and then he fought with Tobirama with his flying Thunder God jutsu. From time to time, Tobarama used his ninjutsu to attack Watergate, and Watergate used his Rasengan to counterattack from time to time. Looking at the three generations in Yondaime who seemed to be fighting Senju Takuma and Tobarama, Orochimaru himself was helpless. His Edo Tensei is affected by many factors, such as the condition of the sacrifice, whether the summoned soul is obedient or not, all of which affect the strength of the person who is reincarnated. Just like now, Senju Takuma and Tobarama's sacrifice are just two ordinary genin, and the two of them are unwilling to fight against the three generations of Wood Leaf, Yuan Fei, and the current Hokage, Watergate. As a result, the dignified Shinobi no Kami and Water Release Grandmaster are almost tied with his juniors. Originally, considering the condition of his body, Orochimaru wasn't so willing to personally fight against the three generations in Watergate, but now that the two strong people who were reincarnated from the Edo Tensei were forced to fight, Orochimaru had no choice but to take action himself. Wood Leaf has been intercepted by Orochimaru and Nangongjia, two Kage-level ninjas. If he can't get enough results on the current battlefield, this plan called Wood Leaf Collapse will be completely reduced to failure. Ninjutsu, Snake Annihilation. His two enemies, the three generations of Hokage, Yuan Fei, and the fourth Hokage, Watergate, he must defeat one of them to form an advantage for his plan. Watergate is now young and strong, although now it seems that he is tied with Senju Takuma. But in fact, whether it is Orochimaru or Watergate, they know in their hearts that it is impossible to defeat Watergate by relying on Tobarama. Then he must use the enemy's weakest point as a breakthrough. Looking at Yuan Fei, who was panting because of trying to resist Senju Takuma, Orochimaru finally used his ninjutsu. The snakes were like kunai, flying quickly in the direction of Yuan Fei. Yuan Fei himself was also trying his best to block Senju Takuma's mantra, and now he looks very tired. The ninjutsu that Orochimaru just used directly made several poisonous snakes rush towards Yuan Fei. The yellow snakes looked very similar to the roots summoned by mantra. Yuan Fei didn't pay attention to them and directly hit the poisonous snakes with the stick transformed by the ape demon. Just when the stick was about to hit the poisonous snakes, after a strange twist, the poisonous snakes rushed directly towards Yuan Fei's body along the stick. The snake's mouth was also wide open, and Yuan Fei could even smell the stench from the snake's mouth. He directly made a decision, throwing the stick in his hand towards the sky, and the original golden staff instantly turned into Yuan Fei's summoned beast, the ape demon. The ape demon's hand directly grabbed the poisonous snakes on his body, and with a little force, these poisonous snakes' necks were broken. Yuan Fei also quickly made hand seals, and a Katan was formed in an instant. Katan, Fire Dragon. Unlike other ninjutsu, Mokutan is almost impossible to target. Only Katan can have a little effect. So Yuan Fei also decisively used this B-class ninjutsu to block the roots that attacked him because he threw away the stick. A huge fire dragon was spat out from his mouth. Because of the injection of a lot of chakra, the attack power and size of this B-class ninjutsu have been significantly improved at this moment. The fire dragon wandered wantonly in a forest. Because of Senju Takuma's actions, the trees formed by Mokutan don't have the characteristics of fire resistance, directly covering the entire roof with flames. Looking at Senju Takuma, Orochimaru's eyes were very cold, and his hands were flying, directly activating the talisman he implanted in the heads of Senju Takuma and Senju Takuma, completely controlling the actions of the two people. Even if he sacrificed some of his strength, it was much better than slacking like now, right? Chapter 3:11. Although forcibly controlling the thoughts of the person summoned by the Edo Tensei will lead to a decrease in strength and flexibility, it is always better than being unable to help at all and causing trouble like now. Senju Takuma and Tobarama's eyes slowly became empty without the lively spirit they had just now. Watergate and Yuan Fei also quickly discovered the changes of the two seniors, and the two also gathered together again, seemingly hoping to find a way to help the two former Hokages. Originally, Only some research materials of the Edo Tensei have been passed down. Orochimaru probably just perfected this ninjutsu and applied it. It can be seen from Orochimaru's clumsiness when he controlled the two former Hokages. But it is precisely because of this that it is even more difficult for us to find a way to free the two former Hokages. In the Wood Leaf, only Spirit Transformation Jutsu and Shikifujin are related to the existence of souls. Spirit Transformation Jutsu is Kato's secret technique. Although we have the relevant information, there is no way to find someone who can practice this secret technique. Now we can only use Shikifujin. Looking at Watergate, Yuan Fei said with a firm face. Orochimaru was his disciple, but he was also his disciple. At this moment, he was blaspheming the two former Hokages of Konoha, and it was also his disciple who pushed Konoha into such a dangerous situation. All of this was his responsibility for letting Orochimaru go. In this case, he should be the one to end everything. Minato knew very well how stubborn this old man named Sarutobi was. Ninja was a profession that was born for fighting. After retiring behind the scenes for 3 generations, many big and small problems have gradually appeared in his body. If things continue to develop according to this situation, Yuan Fei can only live for a few years, and he has to struggle on his sickbed to win these few years. Although he is old, Yuan Fei's pride has never subsided, but it has become more and more firm. Now, Yuan Fei's words were tantamount to choosing a way for himself to die. The corpse go seal was indeed a very powerful sealing technique. No matter if it was a huge chakra or a powerful soul, it could be sealed. However, the price to pay was also very expensive, and that was his own life. Watergate looked at Yuan Fei and felt very uncomfortable in his heart, but this was Yuan Fei's decision. As a proud and powerful ninja, Yuan Fei would not allow his death to be worthless. At this time, Yuan Fei could give up his life in order to inspire the Wood Leaf Ninjas, to unite the Wood Leaf Ninjas, and to protect the freedom of his two masters. Please, Watergate. The eyes of the 3 generations were a little cloudy, and there were obvious traces of age on his face. Yuan Fei was truly old, but the begging of the 3 generations touched Watergate's mood so much that he could only nod bitterly and agree to Yuan Fei's request. Ninjutsu, Shadow Clone Jutsu. Ninjutsu, Shadow Clone Jutsu. Yuan Fei and Watergate's voices sounded at the same time, and the two of them separated into 2 shadow clones, rushing towards Senju Takuma, Tobirama, and Orochimaru. Seal Jutsu, Golden Seal Jutsu. False. Watergate's voice sounded, and the 3 Watergate's clones quickly made hand seals, and chains rose from Watergate's body and his clones. The Golden Seal Jutsu itself is a jutsu unique to the Uzumaki clan. As it is not compatible with the Uzumaki clan chakra, Watergate can't use the original Golden Seal Jutsu, but with the help of Shina Kushina, Watergate used his own chakra to develop a jutsu very similar to the Golden Seal Jutsu. Although it is not as powerful as the Golden Seal Jutsu inherited by the Uzumaki clan, it is also a good way to trap the enemy. Chains with a little metallic luster and exuding light flew from the back of Watergate's body and clones, rushing directly towards Senju Takuma, the Tobirama brothers, and Orochimaru. The extremely fast speed made Senju Takuma and the Tobirama brothers, who have lost their flexibility, directly bound by the chains. Orochimaru could have avoided it, but Yuan Fei's clones and his body, a total of 3 clones, directly blocked Orochimaru's room to escape. Watergate's Golden Seal Jutsu, False, also directly imprisoned Orochimaru. Old man, what are you doing? Orochimaru suddenly had an ominous premonition in his heart. The originally gloomy atmosphere has now been directly dispelled by the throbbing of his heart because of the approaching death. Orochimaru, in the beginning, because of my mistake, I let you leave Konoha. Over the years, I had hoped that you would repent, but you have become even worse. Now, you have led Konoha into such a situation and proposed this plan called Konoha's collapse. As your sensei, I am duty-bound to help you. Whether it is the two former Hokages or you, let me deal with them one by one. After that, Yuan Fei's two clones arrived in front of Senju Takuma and Tobarama. The three clones quickly printed at the same time, and a total of 9 seals were quickly completed. Behind the 3 clones of Yuan Fei, the Shinigami shadow, which can only be seen by the caster and the target, has become so clear at this moment. The Shinigami stretched out his pale hand and directly passed through Yuan Fei's abdomen. The pale hand also directly grabbed Senju Takuma and Tobarama's imprisoned souls in the Edo Tensei, pulling his hand back, and the Edo Tensei's body also collapsed. Yuan Fei's face turned pale as well. It was obvious that he was under a lot of pressure. After removing his 2 clones, he let the chakra in his body recover a little, and once again conveyed his will to the Shinigami behind him. The Shinigami's hand passed through the abdomen of Yuan Fei's body and slowly grabbed Orochimaru's soul. Yuan Fei conveyed the command to the Shinigami to directly extract Orochimaru's soul, but the Shinigami's originally expressionless face showed a very human-like protest. Using his own soul in exchange for the soul of 2 dead people and 1 living person, the Shinigami didn't seem to agree to such a deal. Seeing that Orochimaru's soul seemed to be constantly struggling in the hands of the Shinigami, Yuan Fei knew that he had to make a decision, so he directly conveyed his will to the Shinigami. Although somewhat reluctant, the Shinigami took the short knife in his mouth and cut Orochimaru's soul, directly cutting off the part of Orochimaru's hands. Chapter 312. Pain. Orochimaru didn't have any other feelings, but this kind of pain was etched in his heart. When the Shinigami cut off the soul in Orochimaru's arm, the pain directly made Orochimaru, who had become numb because of several reincarnations, extremely sensitive, and the pain directly attacked Orochimaru's mind. Ah! Orochimaru shouted loudly at the sky, but soon stopped abruptly. Apparently, he had been directly stimulated by the intense pain and lost consciousness. Watergate walked towards Orochimaru, holding a kunai in his hand. Watergate has a deep fear of Orochimaru, because Watergate's master Jiraiya has a very close relationship with Orochimaru, so Watergate thinks that he knows Orochimaru better. This person is simply a madman. As long as it is something he believes in, all the rules of the world are useless in front of him. Such a person is a bit too dangerous. Watergate felt that he can't let Orochimaru leave with a leaf like this. But just when Watergate was about to reach Orochimaru, the 3 generations, who were still holding Orochimaru's shoulder, trembled and reached out their hands to stop Watergate. 3 generations was dying, so their voice was very weak and trembling, but they still mustered up the strength to say to Watergate, "Watergate, now I'm not talking to you as the Hokage of 3 generations, your master, but as an old man named Yuan Fei. I have 3 disciples in my life. Orochimaru is smart, Jiraiya is sincere, and Tsunade is kind. I thought that my disciples would be the mainstay of Konoha's future, but it seems that fate has made a fool of us. Orochimaru, Tsunade, and Jiraiya left Konoha one after another, leaving only me, an old man, to support Konoha with you over the years. Now that I'm about to leave this world, the burden that was originally on me is also removed from my body little by little. Just now, I have sealed the soul of Orochimaru's arm with Shiki Fujin Jutsu. From now on, he can no longer use ninjutsu. Although Orochimaru has done a lot of unforgivable things, I believe that this is a punishment worse than death for him. This child, like my other 2 disciples, grew up under my watch. It's not an exaggeration to say that they are my children, so I'm here to discuss with you as a master and a father. Since Orochimaru has already accepted his punishment, I don't know if Hokage-sama can spare the life of this unfilial disciple who betrayed the wood leaf. 3 generations said. His slightly closed eyes were now filled with tears. It could be said that the 3rd generation treated his 3 disciples the same way he treated his own children. Sandaime-sama was also very angry with Orochimaru's behavior and wanted to teach him a good lesson. But at the moment of his death, the rationality in his heart was quietly suppressed by his emotions. In the mind of 3 generations, all the bits and pieces between himself and his disciples, the more he recalled, the more 3 generations didn't want his disciples to die like this. Changing their usual attitude, 3 generations actually pleaded with Watergate as Orochimaru's master, hoping that Watergate can spare Orochimaru's life. 3 generations' actions also made Watergate unable to react for a while. Although 3 generations usually looked very amiable, Watergate knew that 3 generations were famous for being tough and stubborn in the Woodleaf. Now that 3 generations actually said such words to protect Orochimaru's life, Watergate also couldn't react for a while. 3 generations Sama. Looking at 3 generations' eyes full of tears, Watergate's heart suddenly softened. He only felt that he seemed to know a little bit about the psychological activities of 3 generations. This old man who protected Woodleaf for a lifetime. In the last moment of his life, Watergate felt that he shouldn't refuse, so he also put away the kunai in his hand and said to 3 generations, "I understand what you mean. I promise you that this time I will let Orochimaru leave. It could be regarded as giving him a last chance. If he disappears and never appears in the ninja world, then naturally I won't send people to hunt him down. If he still doesn't repent and even threatens the safety of Woodleaf, at that time I will directly kill him." Hearing Watergate's answer, 3 generations' heart that was originally hanging in the air was also relieved. In any case, at least Orochimaru got a chance to live. It can be regarded as the last gift of his master before he dies, right? Thinking about it, 3 generations felt as if he was immersed in a large, dark, and cold sea. Whether it was physical activity or breathing at this moment seems to have lost its meaning. He just let his mind completely empty. His body, as if by some kind of inspiration, became lighter and lighter, as if he was about to float. Looking at 3 generations' body gradually losing its temperature, Watergate's mood wasn't so good. The pot is always close to the mouth of the well, and the general will inevitably die in battle. Now that 3 generations, as his master, has completed his journey in the world and left this world, then how will he leave? Minato shook his head and cleared his mind of these complicated thoughts. He coldly glanced at the several subordinates of Orochimaru who were maintaining the 4 violet flame formation, and said to them without any emotion, "Since 3 generations and I have promised to spare Orochimaru's life, then naturally we won't go back on our words. You just need to remove the barrier and take Orochimaru away. My conditions will also be conveyed to Orochimaru. If Orochimaru is still as unscrupulous as he is now, and even threatens the safety of Woodleaf, Woodleaf will definitely go all out to hunt down Orochimaru." Several of Orochimaru's men heard Watergate's words. They looked at each other and nodded. So they removed the 4 violet flame formation, lifted the unconscious Orochimaru, and jumped a few times out of Watergate's field of vision. Waving his hand, several Umbu ninjas were called to his side, indicating them to collect the bodies of 3 generations. Watergate also looked at the huge black lion with a golden mane that looked very conspicuous outside the village. The death of 3 generations made Watergate's power reach a historical low, but it is also a good opportunity. The relationship between 3 generations, Danzo, and the elder group is too entangled. If he can completely pull Xianxia into his camp, maybe his power will not decrease but increase. Chapter 313. On the battlefield outside, Woodleaf, Xianxia summoned his familiar beast, Ryo, the black lion, and Jiraiya also summoned Gamabunta from Mount Myaboku. When the battle just started, the Sand and Sound ninjas still sent some teams to test the Woodleaf's defense. After a discussion, Jiraiya and Xianxia decided to block these teams as much as possible, so that the ninja army outside would not dare to act rashly, and buy time for the Woodleaf ninjas to gather. As 2 Kage-tier ninjas, Xianxia and Jiraiya joined forces to kill all the teams that came in to explore the situation, making the ninja army outside hesitate for nearly 5 minutes before they decided to launch an attack desperately. But for a ninja, these 5 minutes are precious. When the fireworks in the sky shone, whether they were instructed by Watergate or not. All the ninjas who didn't have a special mission had spontaneously gone to Woodleaf's main road to carry out a certain amount of defense work. And more people went to the place where the fireworks were launched, where Nangongzhu and Jiraiya were waiting for the Woodleaf ninjas to come to support. As a veteran of Woodleaf, Jiraiya's existence also made many ninjas who came to support feel that they have a core. On the other hand, the Sand and Sound Ninjas Joint Army didn't appear. The so-called Kazekage Raza and the Sound Ninjas leader, Orochimaru, didn't appear. Although they had a detailed plan, they were still mentally inferior, and there were some gaps between the Sand and Sound Ninjas. Under the influence of such factors, the Sand and Sound Shinobi Coalition forces, which were obviously more numerous than Konoha, actually fell into an anxious battle with Konoha, and the casualty rate was much higher than Konoha shinobi. In order to protect their homeland, every ninja of Konoha fought with their lives on the line. Just as the scales of victory were slowly tilting towards the Woodleaf, the Sand and Sound Ninjas seemed to know that they couldn't hold back. The large summoning array that was discovered by Jiraiya was also activated, and two huge pythons with two heads appeared directly on the battlefield. Most of the snake-summoned beasts in the ground dragon cave were not good-tempered. Even Orochimaru, the contractor, had to pay a certain price to make the pythons obey him. In order to allow these two-headed serpents to unleash greater destructive power, Orochimaru also made certain modifications to the magic circle, causing the summoned two-headed serpents to directly go berserk. The Sand and Sound Ninjas never dreamed that their trump card was a big killing machine that couldn't distinguish between friend and foe, but since they summoned the two-headed snakes, they could only let them wreak havoc on the battlefield. The two-headed snakes caused heavy damage to the Woodleaf ninjas, and Jiraiya couldn't stand it anymore, so he used his summoning beast to summon Gamuda of Mount Mayaboku to stop the two-headed snakes. Although the two strange snakes weren't as strong as Toad Bunta in terms of overall strength, they were still cunning and vicious snakes. Even if they only had their instincts and madness left, they weren't easy to kill. Toad Bunta was temporarily tied down. Nangongzhu led the Woodleaf ninjas to constantly kill the Sand and Sound ninjas. It was supposed to be a smooth thing, as long as Gamuda could kill the two snakes, and then he led the Woodleaf ninjas to chase after them. Even wiping out the Sand and Sound ninjas wasn't an impossible goal. But on the other side of the forest outside Woodleaf, a tall and somewhat bloated khaki tanuki suddenly appeared. Whether it was the aura on the tanuki's body that couldn't be ignored, the black and purple patterns on its body, or the very conspicuous Gaara that had lost consciousness on its forehead, all proved that this tanuki belonged to the sand village of the Land of Wind, Ichibi Shikaku. The sudden appearance of a bijou on the battlefield had a huge impact on everyone. Although Sunagakure has never liked Gaara as the Ichibi's Jinchuriki, the morale of Sunagakure still improved when they saw the ultimate power of their village at such a critical moment. The original feeling of depression was swept away directly. This wasn't a good thing, so Nangongzhu immediately rushed to the place where Ichibi Shikaku appeared. He wanted to suppress Ichibi Shikaku and let the Woodleaf ninjas suppress all the ninjas attacking Woodleaf ninjas as soon as possible. Jumping and flashing several times in the forest, Nangongzhu came to the place where Ichibi Shikaku appeared. To Nangongzhu's surprise, he saw Kankuro, Temari, Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura gathered together, looking at Ichibi Shikaku's huge figure with a worried face. Several people seemed to be arguing about something. All of them were red in the face, as if they were going to start a fight if they didn't agree. Nangongzhu also quickly increased his speed and came to the side of Naruto, looking at Temari and Kankuro with a little vigilance. The two Ichibi Column Force Gaara's blood relatives, he asked the two people very seriously, "Are you the ones who made Ichibi lose control and wreak havoc here?" Temari and Kankuro hadn't seen Nangongzhu, but the dangerous aura from Nangongzhu made the two people shudder. They secretly controlled their fans and puppets, ready to attack Nangongzhu at any time. "Uncle, it's not like that." Gaara lost his mind, and then used a ninjutsu called Dozjutsu to let this big tanuki run out. Naruto pulled Nangongia's sleeve behind Nangongjia and said to Nangongjia. Naruto looked at Sasuke and Sakura, and the two children also nodded, confirming Naruto's words. Sir, Temari summoned the courage to come forward and said to Nangongjia, I'm the daughter of the fourth Kazekage of Sunagakure, Raza. My name is Temari. Previously, we were deceived by Orochimaru, and under the leadership of Orochimaru disguised as a Kazekage, we invaded Wood Leaf in violation of the Armistice Agreement. But this is all because of Orochimaru's disappearance. We are willing to continue to coexist peacefully with Wood Leaf. Originally, my brother Kankuro and I want to take Gaara to the front battlefield and let Gaara use Do's jutsu to defeat Wood Leaf Ninja. But when we were in the Chunin exam hall, my brother Kankuro and San Jonamaki had already discovered the abnormality of Kazekage, so we took my brother here. But it seems that Do's jutsu has been transcribed in Gaara's body, and it was directly activated just now. Even Naruto, the three Wood Leaf Ninja, and us can't stop Gaara. Sir, whether for the victory of this war or for the future of Wood Leaf and Sand Village, I beg you to stop Gaara and stop him from killing too many people. Chapter 314. It has to be said that Temari's words were extremely beautiful, directly lowering Sunagakure's position in this war to a very low position. Even people who didn't know the inside story might think that Sunagakure was simply deceived, but in fact, whether this was the case or not, whether it was Nangongjia or Temari, both of them knew clearly in their hearts. If Sunagakure wasn't so traditional and conservative, maybe the next Kazekage of Sunagakure wouldn't be impossible to get involved. Compared to her dull and timid younger brother, Temari's quality can be said to be extremely good. I appreciate you, Nangongjia said bluntly to Temari, which made Temari unable to respond for a while. Although my impression of Sunagakure is not so good, and there's a lot of hatred between us, I appreciate your attitude. This Shikaku is wantonly destroying here, and I want to stop it. I hope you can make Sunagakure different from what it is now. After that, Nangongjia turned and ran toward Shikaku. Make Sunagakure different? Nangongjia's words were still echoing in Temari's mind. What kind of identity can make the conservative Sunagakure change? Temple pondered for a moment, but she quickly forced herself not to continue imagining things. To be able to affect Sunagakure, strength alone is not enough. More righteousness is needed, and there is only one person in Sunagakure who has such righteousness, and that is the leader of Sunagakure, Kazekage. Nangongjia, does he want me to become the Kazekage of Sunagakure? Temari never thought of such a thing, and Nangongjia didn't say that he wanted Temari to become the Kazekage of Sunagakure. But Temari still couldn't help but start to imagine what it would be like to become the Kazekage. Her father is the Kazekage, and Temari was very clear about the majesty and power of the Kazekage. So when this illusion took root in her mind, it grew extremely fast. Even Nangongjia, who deliberately induced Temari, did not expect that his casual move would be so effective. As for Temari's reaction, Nangongjia didn't care so much. After all, his main focus was his own subordinates, the Blood Cloak Pavilion, and the Wood Leaf Village that he had the closest relationship with. The Sand Ninja was a bit too far away, wasn't it? Ichibi Shikaku. In some ancient records, this huge monster was described as such. It grew up in the Nara Desert. At first, it was mistakenly thought to be a monster that was buried and accumulated under the influence of otherworldly magic. It was born from the resentful spirits of the dead who were trapped in the desert and suffocated by the sandstorm. But no one knows how much of these records are true, but Ichibi Shikaku can indeed use his own power to control sand and cast powerful wind-release ninjutsu. Liang, it's time to fight. Although Nangongjia was confident that he could stop the Ichibi Shikaku, Nangongjia still needed to summon Liang to fight the Ichibi Shikaku as soon as possible to boost the morale of the Wood Leaf Ninjas and make the Sand and Sound Ninjas give up resistance. As Nangongjia's hand moved forward, a huge array appeared in the sky. Liang responded to Nangongjia's call and slowly revealed her figure from the huge array. Black fur, golden mane, for hooves, and the end of the tail were burning with golden flames, showing Li Yang's extraordinary aura. Furthermore, golden lightning was leaping above the array, causing everyone to feel an inexplicable pressure in their hearts. Even the Ichibi Shikaku, after sensing Li Yang's aura, turned his huge body and looked at Li Yang's figure with his eyes that were like copper coins. There was a clear doubt in his eyes. The huge guy in front of him could be said to have the same strength as the Ichibi Shikaku, but in his memory, there was no memory of such a black lion. Was it because he had slept for too long that his memory had faded? "Who are you?" Shikaku asked Li Yang in his muffled voice. There was a little bit of joy in his tone. Shikaku's nature was more lively and lively. Although he didn't have any respect for human life and liked to use sand to deprive the lives of fragile individuals, but when he met a strange giant beast that was on the same level as him, he couldn't help but feel close to it. "Little Tanuki, you don't know me, but I know you. There is no conflict between you and me, but this little brother of mine has some cooperation with this village called Woodleaf. Although you and I don't know each other, but it will be better to form a good karma. You can push the child you are lodging in, and I don't have to fight with you. What do you think?" Li Yang's temper was getting better and better in these years. According to her previous temperament, she might have already fought with the Ichibi Shikaku, but now Li Yang found the trace of her lion clan. In order to let the lion clan continue, Li Yang needed to save her energy to maintain the stability of the lion clan space. "Tanuki? You are the Tanuki. I'm a tapir, not a Tanuki." Hearing Li Yang's address, Shikaku suddenly felt as if its tail was stepped on. Like its host, Shikaku also had a violent temper. When others touched the place that it hated, that kind of crazy character would occupy its mind. A chakra quickly condensed in Shikaku's mouth, and a cyan-colored sphere quickly shot toward Li Yang. Wind release, true space jade. 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 4 vacuum jades were continuously spat out from Shikaku's mouth, directly blocking all the directions that Li Yang could dodge. She could only receive at least one of the vacuum jades. But different from what Shikaku imagined, Li Yang didn't seem to have any intention of dodging. Instead, the golden flames that were originally on her hooves and tail directly covered her entire body. The originally mysterious and domineering black lion turned into a golden lion that was as brilliant as the heavens. Before the vacuum jades touched Li Yang's body, they were directly evaporated by the golden flames burning on the surface of Li Yang's body. Chapter 315. Little Tanuki. Looking at Shikaku, who was very angry, Li Yang also called out, but she was directly interrupted by Shikaku. "Don't call me Little Tanuki. I'm Tapir. Seeing that there was no way to communicate with Shikaku, Li Yang could only look at Xianxia, who was standing beside her, with a bit of inquiring expression. Xianxia also understood Li Yang's meaning, so he could only say to Li Yang in a slightly louder voice, "Don't kill him. As long as you subdue this guy, I naturally have a way to let him enter the seal in his host body." Hearing Xianxia's words, Li Yang also nodded. She made up her mind to end this battle quickly. The rising golden flame on her body became more and more active. Golden flame lines condensed above Li Yang's shoulder blades, and not long after, the flame lines weaved a pair of burning golden flame wings. "Roar!" Li Yang roared towards the sky, then directly shook the huge golden flame wings on her back. At the same time, Li Yang's huge body also began to slowly float in the air. Shikaku's body was relatively bloated, and it didn't have the ability to fly in the sky, so it could only look at Li Yang flying in the sky while cursing loudly. Occasionally, it would shoot vacuum jade towards Li Yang. Li Yang naturally wouldn't passively take a beating. Every time she found a flaw in Shikaku's body, Li Yang would open her mouth and shoot a burning golden flame lightning toward Shikaku. After several rounds of fighting, Li Yang was fine, but Shikaku's body had many big and small scorched holes. Even Shikaku, who had a strong recovery ability, couldn't use sand to reconstruct these wounds. If one looked carefully, one would find that the golden flame and lightning were constantly jumping on these wounds, destroying them, making Shikaku's body unable to heal. The pain made Shikaku's originally crazy heart become even crazier. If it wasn't for the lack of time, Shikaku simply wanted to shoot a steaming hot Baijidama at Liang. But after all, his subordinate column force was really weak, and he was also seriously injured by Liang, so he could only rely on the vacuum jade to vent his inner madness and resentment. This little raccoon cat is really not cute. Liang looked at Shikaku as if he was looking at his own immature younger generation. Just when Shikaku was preparing to counterattack, the flames and lightning in the hole created by Liang's attack began to grow violently and soon covered Shikaku's whole body. However, these flames and lightning didn't tightly stick to Shikaku's body. Instead, they intertwined and formed a huge cage that imprisoned Shikaku inside. Hey, Nangongbrat, it's time to watch your performance. I've already controlled this little raccoon cat according to your request. Nangongjia nodded to Liang, jumped a few times, and stood on Liang's forehead, then pointed at the looming figure of Gaara in between Shikaku's eyebrows. This Shikaku didn't completely break away from its seal, but because its Jinchuriki Gaara used a ninjutsu called feigning sleep technique to suppress its consciousness, Shikaku gained control of its body, and then condensed it into the appearance of Shikaku with the help of sand. But in the end, as a subordinate of column force, Gaara is still the core of Ichibi Shikaku. As long as we can awaken Gaara from his slumber through external attacks, everything will be solved. Although according to my original idea, even if I kill this child, it doesn't matter. But after all, this child is the son of Kazekage, and he should be treated with respect. Now, let me end this farce and put an end to everything. With that, Nangongjia held his Heaven's Disaster Sword, jumped down from Liang's head, and stood directly in the middle of Shikaku's eyebrows, looking at Gaara, who was covered by a thin layer of sand. And Shikaku, who had been imprisoned, also understood the intention of the ant called Little Friend by the Black Lion. Shikaku, who was unwilling to return to the imprisonment, tried to shake his body so that Nangongjia couldn't wake up the sleeping Gaara. However, Liang's technique was naturally extremely effective. After discovering that Shikaku, who was imprisoned by him, began to struggle, Liang immediately controlled his technique and gradually began to reduce the range of Shikaku's activities. The damage of the golden flames and lightning to Shikaku was obvious, so Shikaku also avoided contact with such power. In this case, Shikaku could only gradually reduce the size of its movements. In the end, it even used its fat body to sway from side to side, which looked very funny. Nangongjia naturally wasn't affected by Shikaku, and his feet were like a pair of nails stuck on Shikaku's body. Steadily holding his Heaven's Disaster Sword, he gently cut open the thin film formed by the sand covering Gaara's body, stretched out his hand, and directly slapped Gaara's face, but Gaara didn't seem to have any reaction at all, and his eyes were still closed. Nangongjia didn't believe it, and swung his arm to give Gaara a big slap, but Gaara still didn't wake up. Ha! Are you dumbfounded? This kid's dozing technique is a ninjutsu that seals his mind. Even you can't wake Gaara up, because Gaara's heart is unwilling to respond to your awakening. No matter how hard you try, it will be in vain. Shikaku seemed to be aware of what was happening above his head, and directly ridiculed Nangongjia. But Nangongjia didn't pay attention to Shikaku's trash talk. Instead, he began to think about who could have a spiritual relationship with Gaara. Oh no, resonance. Gaara's sister and brother naturally couldn't do it. After all, Gaara didn't open his heart to these two relatives before. Then, he had to find someone who was very similar to Gaara's experience, or someone who Gaara thought was similar. Gaara was a tailed beast, column force. Gaara had a Kazekage as his father. Gaara had always been rejected by others. Is there anyone here who meets these conditions? Wait, column force? Kage's father? Rejected by others? Nangongjia waved his hand, and shouted to the people below him, "Don't worry. Naruto, come here. Give Gaara a friendly punch." Chapter 316. When Gaara opened his eyes again, he found that his sister Temari and his brother Kankuro were looking at him anxiously. Sasuke and Naruto, who had just fought fiercely with him, were also staring at him closely. Shikaku, who was originally very disobedient in his body and always used his will to attack Gaara's consciousness, also fell into a rare silence. Everything was so beautiful. The only flaw was that his left cheek seemed to be a little swollen and painful. "Gaara, are you okay? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere on your body? Do you need me to find a medical ninja to check it for you?" Tempura's fear of Gaara was gone, and she looked at her brother with love and tenderness. Although Kankuro was still a little timid, the caring look in his eyes was completely different from the fear he had before. Although Gaara's memory was a little fuzzy because he completely liberated Shikaku's consciousness in his body, Gaara knew that he didn't do anything special before. But now his brother and sister's attitude towards him was really a huge reversal. Gaara became a little unprepared. "Gaara," looking at Gaara, Naruto suddenly said to Gaara, "You and I are the same kind of people, but we took different paths. Beside me, more and more friends and relatives walk down the path with me. But around you, everyone is drifting further and further away. Temari and Kankuro have already told me some things about you. And I also told Temari and Kankuro about my experience. I don't know if you want to try it. Try to open your heart and try to accept others into your heart. No one can guarantee that they won't get hurt, but no one can just be an Azura who only loves himself. Your elder sister, your elder brother, they truly love and care for you, but you cast them aside time and time again. This time, not only give them a chance, but also give yourself a chance to not be so lonely." Naruto's words entered Gaara's ears one by one. Since Naruto could say such a thing, and even Gaara's own understanding of his name, it was obvious that he already knew Gaara in his heart. If someone else said such a thing, Gaara would definitely not hear it. But now, without Shikaku's disturbance, Gaara's emotions have gradually calmed down, and Naruto's very similar experience and their current different situations also made Gaara agree with Naruto's statement. But for Gaara, the betrayal of his uncle Yakshimaru was a deep thorn in Gaara's heart, making him unwilling to open his heart. Temari and Kankuro were naturally the people who knew Gaara the best. The two also overcame their fear and came to Gaara's side and slowly held his hands. Gaara looked at the two people in surprise and even released his murderous aura towards them tentatively. Temari and Kankuro's faces turned pale because of the murderous aura, but they didn't loosen their grip on Gaara's hands at all. Instead, they held his hands even tighter. Gaara, Temari, and Kankuro still firmly held their brother's hands. Over the years, the two naturally knew what kind of environment their brother lived in. But for various reasons, Temari and Kankuro could only be in awe of Gaara and alienate their younger brother. But now, the two had obviously decided to get along well with their brother and let them be filled with the affection that a family should have. Brother, sister, Gaara's murderous aura gradually converged. Although there was still some confusion and bewilderment in his tone, he still called out to Temari and Kankuro. Hearing Gaara's call, Temari and Kankuro vaguely saw Gaara's innocent appearance when he was still young. The feelings in their hearts became stronger and stronger, and they directly hugged Gaara in their arms. Naruto, Sasuke, and the others naturally understood and left, leaving some space for the three siblings to reconcile. Since then, Orochimaru, the main participant of the wood industry collapse plan, was seriously injured and left the wood leaf. The two double-headed snakes, as the main offensive force, were also eliminated by Gamabunta. The Sand Ichibi column force was also directly defeated by Gaara. This attack against the wood leaf came to an end. Wood leaf also lost a lot of Chunin and Genin, and many Jonin were also injured. In order to prevent Orochimaru from using the Edo Tensei to summon the first Hokage and second Hokage, Sarutobi sacrificed himself and cast the Forbidden Book Shiki Fujin, at the cost of his own life, allowing the souls of the first Hokage and second Hokage to rest in peace. San Joninbaki was also shocked when he learned that the Sand Kazekage was dead, and that Orochimaru was the one who gave orders to the Sand Ninja during this time. After many negotiations with Wood Leaf, a new peace agreement was signed. However, when Baki walked out of the Hokage's office building, his gloomy face was enough to prove that the Sand Ninja also spent a lot of money to stabilize Wood Leaf. Wood Leaf announced Orochimaru's evil deeds to the whole ninja world the day after the battle and issued a kill order. But strangely, Wood Leaf didn't send their elite ninjas to suppress Orochimaru. This kill order was as pale and weak as a piece of white paper. After this, Wood Leaf naturally had a diplomatic game with the Land of Wind and the Land of Rice. Nangongja didn't know what kind of compromise was made, and he had no interest in it. After this battle, Nangongja's first appearance was at the funeral of 3 generations of Hokage. Nangongja didn't go early, wearing a black suit. Watergate, as the disciple of 3 generations of Hokage, had already started a long speech. After listening for a long time, Nangongja didn't listen to anything. His mind was still echoing what 3 generations of Hokage said in front of him when he first arrived at Wood Leaf. As long as there are leaves flying, there will be a fire burning, and the fire will shine on the village, and then new leaves will sprout again. Today, as a rather old leaf of Wood Leaf, 3 generations of Hokage has left the branch. But the fallen leaves still fell to the ground, contributing their own nutrients to the new leaf. In the future, Wood Leaf will still be the most dazzling pearl in the ninja world. Chapter 317. The funeral of the 3 generations wasn't that complicated. After Watergate finished his speech, the Wood Leaf ninjas sent flowers to the 3 generations one by one, and the funeral was over. After all, a ninja's profession doesn't allow a person to be overly immersed in sorrow. After all, the ninjas who died in this war were buried together with Sandaime-sama. Everyone still has to sort out their own mood and re-immerse themselves in the endless missions without stopping. Watergate walked slowly in the direction of his office, wanting to continue to deal with some diplomatic affairs with the Land of Wind and Land of Rice. But before he walked to the place, he saw Nangongja standing opposite him. "I have completed the thing you asked me to do. So when are you going to complete the thing I asked you to do?" Nangongja didn't care that there were other people standing beside Watergate. Although these people can be said to be Watergate's confidants, some things shouldn't be said so openly. Minato waved his hand to signal the people behind him to retreat for the time being. Minato also said to Nangongja with a serious expression, "You don't have to worry about this. When Wood Leaf was attacked, Root didn't send a single person. According to your information, Danzo's Root even provided some help to Orochimaru when he attacked Wood Leaf. This Danzo keeps saying how much he loves Wood Leaf every day, and how willing he is to contribute to the village. But now, because of his own selfish desires, Wood Leaf suffered an unprecedented loss since the founding of the village. It seems that he is being generous to others. Originally, I still had some consideration for his friendship with the 3 generations and the elders of Kiba. But now, Danzo has obviously crossed the line. Even without you, I won't easily forgive this guy. Once I need you to participate in the operation, I will inform you." Watergate's words left no room for negotiation. It was as if he had placed Danzo in the position of an enemy. Without the restraints of the 3 generations, coupled with Watergate's dislike of Danzo's methods, it was time to pull out the thorn in Danzo's Wood Leaf. Since you already have a plan, then I don't have to say anything more. I still have due trust in you, Watergate. Presumably, Watergate already knows that I have a relatively close relationship with the Bloodcloak Pavilion. If you need me, I can still fight for some power in the Bloodcloak Pavilion. Nangongja told Watergate that he had some connections with the Bloodrobe Pavilion. After all, such a thing could not be concealed. Although the core disciples of Blood Garment Pavilion were cultivators of internal energy, which was completely different from the ninjas who practiced chakra, they still used civilians who did not have any cultivation base in some industries. It was too easy for these ordinary people who worked in the industries of Blood Garment Pavilion to plant spies in them. It was not too difficult to get some information about Xianxia. Therefore, in order to have a better foundation for the cooperation between Watergate and himself, Xianxia directly told him some information that Watergate might know about him. Xianxia's meaning was clear to Watergate, and Xianxia also knew a little about Watergate's idea. Although the two people may not have the same starting point, their goal was the same, which was to take down Danzo, the source of evil of Woodleaf. After that, Xianxia returned to his home. Watergate looked at Xianxia's back and sighed before leaving. In the end, Watergate and Xianxia were two different kinds of people. Watergate was a person who could face all kinds of hardships and endure for his own ideals. As long as it was for his ideals, he would not hesitate to sacrifice his life or even his wife and children. Compared to Watergate, Xianxia was a little simpler. From beginning to end, Xianxia wanted to protect his family and let his family live a better life. For example, if Watergate and Xianxia saved the world, Watergate saved the world because the world needed to be saved, and he happened to have the ability to save the world, so the world was saved. For Xianxia, whether the world became better or worse, Xianxia didn't care so much. Anyway, he had a certain amount of strength, and it was enough to protect the few people he wanted to protect. When the crisis swept across the world, Xianxia would also risk his life to protect the people he cherished. In general, Watergate was a more idealistic person, and Xianxia was a more secular person. For Xianxia, saving the world was just something he did to protect the people around him. Xianxia sat quietly at home. For the past few days, Watergate hadn't informed Xianxia about his plan. However, Xianxia didn't care at all. After all, the Woodleaf had just experienced a war, and as Xianxia's target, Danzo, was deeply rooted in the Woodleaf. It wasn't easy to remove him. Therefore, Xianxia was prepared to wait. After all, he had waited for so long, and a little more time wouldn't make a difference. However, since Danzo was being closely watched by Watergate, Xianxia was slightly relieved. He brought his sister Xianxia, Mishiro, and Little Linger to Xianxia's residence. Anyway, Xianxia had been staying at home all this time. If there was any trouble, Xianxia could protect the girls and leave immediately. The three girls were naturally very happy to be able to return to the environment they were most familiar with. From time to time, they would bring Yuri of the Uchiha family to stay for a while. After all, Yuri was relatively unknown compared to the Uchiha couple. Even if she was occasionally seen, as long as she didn't wear the Uchiha clan's clothes or reveal her Sharingan, she wouldn't be exposed at all. So Xianxia didn't have much psychological pressure. On this day, Xianxia, Mishiro, Little Linger, and the newly arrived Yuri were sitting together for dinner. There was a knock on the door of Xianxia's residence. Before Xianxia could react, Little Linger ran to the door and opened it. "Ah, you are?" Sasuke hadn't seen Little Linger before, or maybe he had seen her before. After all, it had been a long time, so he didn't have any impression of her. A very cute girl suddenly appeared in his sensei's house. He didn't expect his sensei to have such a habit of keeping a mistress. Chapter 3:18. Ignoring Sasuke's question, Little Linger carefully looked at Sasuke. She seemed to be muttering something, but Sasuke didn't hear it clearly. "You're Sasuke, right? You're much cuter than I thought. It seems like you're here to find Brother Xianxia. Come on, we just finished dinner. If you haven't had dinner yet, you can also eat here." For a long time, Little Linger and the other two girls lived with Uchiha Fugaku couple and Yuri in the Lion Clan's different space. The few of them were quite familiar with each other. After all, they had been seeing each other all this time. Naturally, Linger also met the Fugaku couple, who were Sasuke's parents. When they arrived at Konoha before, Minamiya also deliberately told the girl some things about himself in Konoha, including teaching Sasuke some old swordsmanship. So, with such a combination of factors, Little Linger recognized Sasuke standing at the door. Although Sasuke was a little confused, he still followed little Linger to the living room of Nangong's house. At this moment, Nangongja, Mashiro, and Nangong Ro were all sitting in the living room and seemed to be chatting, while Yuri Koyuri cleaned up the dishes and went to the kitchen to wash them. Looking at the three girls in front of him, even Sasuke, who has never had feelings for men and women, felt that the girls in front of him were so beautiful, each with their own merits. Mashiro looked very quiet and elegant, her long hair casually scattered on her shoulders, and her white clothes made people feel that she had a kind of water like gentleness and tranquility. But Mashiro's eyes were particularly full of heroic spirit. The combination of tenacity and gentleness was so clever, forming a unique beauty. Nangong Ro sat closer to Nangong than Mashiro. Because the two have been together for a long time, it was inevitable that there were some similarities in temperament. It was like the sun and the moon gathered together. Although they had different colors, they were dazzling from the same root. In addition, Nangong Ro's green clothes showed a kind of vitality that was difficult to hide, like a green grass full of vitality in the spring, making everyone feel a kind of vitality in their heart. As for Xiao Ling-er, who had just brought him in, she was wearing a light yellow dress. Mashiro and Nangong Ro's dresses were plain with no embroidery, but Little Linger's dress was embroidered with 100 flowers in spring pattern. Her long hair was tied up in a delicate bun, looking very delicate, making people feel that they couldn't help but love her. Her face with a little baby fat and slightly smiling lips were very likable. My God, so my Nangong sensei is actually a peerless sex fiend? He actually hid these 3 peerless beauties in his home. Moreover, they were completely unknown. If he hadn't coincidentally bumped into these girls this time, he didn't know when he would be able to see these girls hidden by his teacher. Greetings to Nangong sensei and all of you. Sasuke naturally greeted Nangongja and the 3 girls out of courtesy, but when he called them teacher's wife, Nangongja and the 3 girls' faces changed directly. Nangongja was a little scared, but then he was relieved. After all, Sasuke shouldn't have seen Nangong Ro and the other 2 girls, so it was reasonable to misunderstand. The other 3 girls weren't as simple as Nangongja thought. Needless to say, Little Linger was almost considered as Nangongja watched her grow up. For Nangongja, she was more like an elder brother and a younger sister. However, Mashiro and Nangong Ro's faces were quietly red at the moment. Mashiro was naturally needless to say. Since Nangongja directly fell out with Nangongja in order to save her, her heart was almost hanging on Nangongja. However, Nangongja had never valued this kind of love so much, so she could only quietly hide these thoughts in her heart and didn't dare to say it out loud. Nangong Ro grew up under Nangongja's care. Among the people present, only Nangong Ro knew Nangongja the earliest and knew him the longest. In the past, Nangong Ro's attachment to Nangongja could be explained by the friendship between siblings. However, Nangong Ro's heart was clear that Nangongja wasn't her biological brother, so all of this was worth carefully thinking about, wasn't it? The 2 girls looked at Nangongja with slightly resentful eyes at the same time, but Nangongja didn't know anything and thought that he had offended the 2 girls. However, after all, in front of his half-disciple, Nangongja couldn't easily lose face, so he could only use his eyes to appease the 2 girls. Sasuke? A voice suddenly sounded, directly breaking the slightly awkward atmosphere between everyone. The one who spoke was naturally Yuri Kiyuri from the Uchiha clan, and Sasuke also looked at the person who called his name. You are Yuri Koyuri, ne-san? Although Yuri Koyuri and Sasuke were not descendants of the same branch, Yuri Koyuri was also known as a genius after all. Fugaku, as the patriarch of the Uchiha clan, also praised Yuri Koyuri at some family banquets and festivals, so Sasuke also had some impression of her. He forgot to tell Yuri Koyuri not to come out and meet Sasuke. Otherwise, many things wouldn't be so easy to hide. He quickly coughed and gave Yuri Koyuri a look, and Yuri Koyuri naturally quickly realized his gaffe and quickly suppressed his surprise after meeting Sasuke. Are you curious why I'm still alive? Yuri Koyuri naturally saw the doubt in Sasuke's eyes. So Yuri Koyuri decided to directly speak first to block the possibility of Sasuke getting to the bottom of the matter. I was performing a mission outside the village on that day, so I didn't stay in the village. At that time, I was in a team with the sister who just came to the door to pick you up, and she is Nangong Sensei's sister. At that time, for various reasons, Nangong Sensei came to find Little Linger and just happened to bump into the ninja sent by the mastermind behind the scenes to kill me. So I was saved. Yuri Koyuri's words were not finished, but he was directly interrupted by Sasuke. Mastermind behind the scenes. Although Sasuke guessed the truth of the matter many times in his heart, someone controlling his brother and making Itachi do this series of things was naturally one of Sasuke's guesses. But he never expected to hear such a statement from the mouth of the Uchiha survivor, Yuri Koyuri. Nangong and the other three girls looked at Yuri Koyuri with black lines on their faces. Is this intentional or not? They didn't know that Yuri Koyuri was such a big mouth, but now he actually leaked so much important information in just a few words. They simply didn't know how to smooth things over perfectly. Chapter 319. Since it was caused by Yuri Koyuri, it was natural for Yuri Koyuri to solve it himself. He took Sasuke directly to the side room of Nangong's house. The two of them whispered for a long time, and it seemed that things were finally clear. Sasuke and Yuri Koyuri went to Nangongja together. Nangongja wasn't worried about whether Yuri Koyuri knew that Uchiha Fugaku and his wife were still alive, because this news was different from the one-sided information revealed by Yuri Koyuri before. As long as he dared to leak a little bit of information, it would have a great impact. Yuri Koyuri would never say it so easily. As for how Yuri Koyuri fooled Sasuke in the end, Nangongja wasn't that interested. In contrast, Nangongja was more concerned about the reason why Sasuke came to his house late at night. Tell me, Nangongja didn't talk nonsense with Sasuke. He gestured to Yuri Koyuri to let Yuri Koyuri temporarily leave some space for the two of them. When only Nangongja and Sasuke were left in the room, Nangongja continued, I know your character. As long as you can solve a problem by yourself, you will never bother others. Today, you came at this time, which is enough to prove that the current matter has a lot to do with you. And you don't have the confidence that you could do it perfectly and leave no regrets. When Sasuke heard Nangongja's words, he didn't feel that his thoughts were exposed. Instead, he felt that this was the right thing to do. After all, whether it was personal strength or life experience, Nangongja was much richer than Sasuke, a young genin. On the contrary, if Nangongja didn't see such a thing clearly, Sasuke would slightly despise Nangongja. I think Nangong Sensei should know about Orochimaru, right? Sasuke didn't answer Nangongja's question directly. Instead, he seemed to be evasive. Orochimaru? Of course, Sasuke wouldn't mention Orochimaru for no reason. A rebellious Sannin in Sasuke's generation. Nangongja nodded and motioned Sasuke to continue. During the second round of the Chunin exam, this man, named Orochimaru, left this curse mark on my neck. I believe that with Leaf's investigative methods, this kind of thing can be easily found out. So, teacher, you should have received this news as well. Not long ago, several people claiming to be Orochimaru's subordinates came to me. They told me that the curse mark on my neck is the most powerful curse mark of heaven. As long as I follow them and join Orochimaru, I will be able to obtain the true power of the curse mark of heaven. Moreover, I can also get the guidance of Orochimaru, who is a Kage-level powerhouse, and get the resources to make me stronger quickly. Just now, Yuri Koyuri told me something, but I know that you must be hiding something. But I don't mind, because it's all because of my own lack of ability that you hide things from me like this. Now, this is an opportunity for me to take my destiny in my own hands and let the truth of the world appear in front of me. I came here this time to ask Nangong Sensei to help me hide the surveillance from Leaf's Umbu, so that I have a chance to leave Leaf and meet Orochimaru. Sasuke faced Nangongja with sincerity. He put down all the unnecessary pride of others and just put himself in the identity of a junior to communicate with Nangongja. Sasuke, I also have some of my own intelligence channels. A long time ago, I also worked for Orochimaru for a period of time. At that time, I had already noticed how cold this man's heart was. After all these years, this man had become more and more unpredictable. And some of the information I got seems to say that Orochimaru met your brother in an organization and was severely defeated by your brother. So Orochimaru has been spying on the Uchiha clan's unique Sharingan, and you naturally became Orochimaru's first choice target. I won't advise you not to go to Orochimaru, but I hope you could be aware of it. Because if you go, although you may get more than what you can get in Wood Leaf, on the other side of the scale of benefits is your life. As long as you understand this, I can arrange for you to leave Wood Leaf smoothly, at least for 30 minutes. You won't be discovered by Wood Leaf's Umbu and patrolling ninjas. Nangongjia didn't advise Sasuke not to do such a betrayal of the village. After all, Wood Leaf in Nangongjia's mind is not so sacred and inviolable. And for Sasuke's character, it is indeed difficult to get rapid growth in Wood Leaf. Nangongjia knows this. Sasuke knows it even more. Only under the coercion of Orochimaru can Sasuke get the growth he deserves. Thank you, Sensei. This time, either I return with glory or I die in a foreign land. I don't care about these two endings. I know how powerless I am. When my brother killed my entire clan, I was powerless to stop him. When a ninja named Haku injured my teammates, I was still powerless to stop him. After that, there were many similar things that happened. Even if there are deep wounds all over my body, it's not as painful as this feeling of powerlessness. So, I decided to leave Wood Leaf. I'm sorry, Sensei, not only have to accept my rebellious decision, but also help me complete such a difficult request. Sasuke said, but stood up and bowed deeply to Nangongjia. Nangongjia stood up and helped Sasuke up, slightly shook his head, and said to Sasuke, "It's a pity that you and I don't have a master-disciple relationship. I can only teach you some swordsmanship. However, I do have some feelings for him, and he could be considered half a disciple of mine." People often say that the relationship between a master and a disciple is no different from the relationship between a father and a son. You're like my nephew. This kind of thing is just a small matter for me. Even if it's to help you get revenge, it's just a small matter. But I still hope that you can find all the answers by yourself. Only then can you really grow. I hope you don't disappoint my expectations and can grow up to be a man of indomitable spirit. Nangongjia's words directly put himself in the position of Sasuke's elder. And out of respect for Nangongjia, Sasuke also carefully remembered Nangongjia's words in his heart. He nodded slightly and smiled at Nangongjia. Unlike the slightly stiff smile in the past, Sasuke's smile at this moment was extraordinarily warm. It was like finding a pair of warm hands to push his back so that he can bravely move forward on the thorny road. Chapter 320. Looking at Sasuke's departing figure, Nangongjia slowly closed the gate of his courtyard. Miyagi, Sasuke can be regarded as half of your disciple. Are you willing to push him directly into the fire pit? Mashiro, who was standing next to Nangongjia, said to Nangongjia with a little worry in his eyes. Over the years, Nangongjia has seen many amazing people, but the only one who can inherit a little of Nangongjia's legacy is the child of the Uchiha family who just came out of Nangongjia's house. Mashiro has received a lot of confidential information in the Blood Cloak Pavilion over the years, and he has a deep understanding of Orochimaru. Orochimaru is a ruthless beast in human form. As long as it is beneficial to him, he will open his fangs and pounce on the target fiercely. With Sasuke's character and experience, in the hands of Orochimaru, it's inevitable that he will be eaten by Orochimaru. However, Nangongjia didn't seem to agree with Mashiro's words. He waved his hand and walked into the house with Mashiro. After sitting down casually, he said to Mashiro, "I taught Sasuke for a while, but do you know what kind of swordsmanship I taught him? It is the most ruthless and decisive of all the swordsmanship I learned, the remnant of the fatal 13 swords. Swordsmanship is the reflection of a person's heart. Sasuke will not become a loyal dog raised by Wood Leaf. He is most suitable to be a goshawk soaring in the sky and hunting in the sky. Woodleaf is not the place to teach a goshawk, and I am not suitable to teach a goshawk. The various grievances between Orochimaru and Sasuke and Itachi are destined to intertwine and collide with each other unexpectedly. Let's see how much impact Sasuke, a chess piece, will have on the world's general trend and those high and mighty people. You go and inform the Bloodcloak Pavilion's disciples lurking in the Woodleaf and cooperate with Sasuke to leave the Woodleaf if necessary. When Mashiro heard Nangong's words, although he didn't quite understand, he still followed Nangong's instructions and informed the disciples of the Bloodcloak Pavilion in the Woodleaf. Time passed quietly, and finally, it was the day when Sasuke and the Sound Ninja met. Sasuke also directly went into battle and left the old house he had lived in for more than 10 years without taking anything. Originally, he was going to leave Woodleaf directly, but Sasuke's feet didn't seem to listen to him. He slowly deviated from the route he should take and actually walked in the direction of his teammate Sakura's house. Sasuke actually heard Sakura's confession at that time when his memory was blurred by the curse of the heavens. Before that, from the two of them attending Ninja Academy at the same time to performing tasks in a team, Sakura also expressed her love again and again. Sasuke himself didn't know what it was like to love a person, but Sakura's care and care still left a shallow shadow in Sasuke's lonely heart. When Sasuke was about to leave the Woodleaf, he didn't know if he could return safely again. Sasuke still couldn't suppress the emotions in his heart and slowly walked to Sakura's house. Knock, knock. Sasuke knocked on the wooden door of Sakura's house with his hand, and soon someone answered inside. After the door was opened, a woman with the same cherry-colored long hair, but obviously older, opened the door. Hello, this is Haruno's house. What can I do for you? The person who opened the door was naturally Sakura's mother, Mabi. Although Mabi occasionally saw the photos of Sakura's three-person team, she didn't pay much attention to it and didn't recognize Sasuke's identity for a while. Sasuke respectfully saluted Mabi and then introduced himself to Mabi. I'm in the same team as Sakura, Uchiha Sasuke from Team 7. Today, I suddenly wanted to come and chat with Sakura. I didn't inform you in advance, so I took the liberty to disturb you. Hearing Sasuke's name, Mabi naturally knew that the boy in front of her was the Prince Charming that her daughter had been thinking about. Carefully looking at Sasuke, Mabi found that the child looked a little cold. She didn't know whether it was intentional or unintentional. Although he had a lot of attraction for young people like Sakura, Mabi's heart wasn't so comfortable. After all, these children were only 11 or 12 years old. It should be the time for their nature to bloom, but they were always so gloomy, which made people feel uncomfortable. And Sasuke himself was from the Uchiha clan. In the past, Uchiha could be said to be rampant in the Woodleaf. There were often many people who relied on their kinship with the Uchiha clan to make trouble in Mabi's clothing store. So Mabi has always disliked those people who came from rich families. Since you're my Sakura's teammate, there is naturally no disturbance. It just so happens that Sakura is also at home. Come in and sit for a while. I will call Sakura out. Although Mabi still had a gentle demeanor, it was a kind of surface politeness that made people feel very uncomfortable. But Sasuke didn't seem to care at all, so he walked inside the room under Mabi's guidance. Not long after, Sakura finally came out of her room in the midst of the chaos. Dressed in casual clothes with some cherry blossom patterns, Sakura lost some of the heroic spirit of a ninja and gained some of the gentleness and charm of a woman. Sasuke, I just heard Mom say that you want to talk to me? Sakura looked at Sasuke, who suddenly came to visit. Her heart was now in a mess, and her face was red. Naturally, she was a little nervous. After Mabi called Sakura down, she didn't avoid it at all. Instead, she looked at her daughter's embarrassed expression with great interest, which made Sakura feel even more embarrassed. Without thinking about the shyness in her heart, Sakura rushed forward, grabbed Sasuke's wrist, and pulled Sasuke all the way to her room. When Sakura came back to her senses, she found that she and Sasuke were already standing in the room where she had just dressed up in a hurry. Sasuke, Sakura immediately wanted to explain to Sasuke, But she found that Sasuke was looking at her very seriously, and the words that were in her throat were also held back. "I'm leaving with Leaf, huh? What did you say?" Sakura seemed to be disturbed by Sasuke's words for a while, but then she looked at Sasuke and said, "Are you going to travel outside the village or practice? If you came to find me to go with you, it's not impossible." "No, I'm leaving the village, and it's a long time. I have asked Nangong, Sensei, and he also agreed with my decision. I came this time because I don't know if I can come back safely, so I came to see you." Chapter 3:21. Sasuke walked on the road in a daze. He didn't remember what he said to Sakura after that, because in Sasuke's mind, all he could see was Sakura crying like a pear blossom in the rain, looking at him with tears in her eyes. At that moment, Sasuke's heart was really soft. At that moment, Sasuke really hoped that he could tell Sakura that he wouldn't leave and that he would stay. But Sasuke still suppressed this thought in his heart. If it didn't have so much pain and hatred, he would definitely stay. But now, his brother was wronged, and his family members were killed. Sasuke felt that he couldn't just care about the love in front of him. Sasuke hoped that he could get enough power to protect everything he wanted to protect. After all, people don't live just for themselves. You finally came. Although Sasuke's thoughts weren't so clear, he still walked out of the Wood Leaf Village according to the route that Nangongja gave him. Waiting for Sasuke outside the Wood Leaf Village were the 4 sound ninjas who set up a barrier around the battlefield of Watergate, Yuan Fei, and Orochimaru during the Chunin exam. The one who spoke to Sasuke was a guy with light blue-gray hair, and even painted his lips blue. He looked a little evil. "Let me introduce myself. My name is Zukin, and this is..." Zukin had just reached out his hand to his companions and wanted to tell Sasuke the names of his other 3 companions. But he was interrupted by Sasuke's cold glance. "I was invited by Orochimaru to increase my strength, not to make friends with a group of small fries like you. Since you know my identity and know that Orochimaru values me, then put your attitude right." "Got it." On Sasuke's face, there was unconcealable coldness and contempt, which made the 4 sound ninjas, who were a little arrogant and didn't like Sasuke, a little uncomfortable. "You bastard. Who do you think you are? How dare you be so disrespectful to Orochimaru-sama? I'm going to beat you up." Although the 4 of them were women, Toyo, who was the most irritable, also lost her temper directly at Sasuke. But Jigibu walked to Toyo's side, stretched out his thick hand and grabbed Toyo's arm, indicating that Toyo shouldn't be so rude. But Toyo didn't appreciate it at all. Instead, she looked at Jigibu, who grabbed her arm with some disgust, and said loudly, "You fat man, how dare you touch this old lady? Believe it or not, I will cut off your fat hand." Zillang Fang was very disgusted with people who insulted others with dirty words. When he became the one who was insulted, he became even angrier. He was ready to argue or fight with Toyo. But at this time, a powerful momentum rose from Sasuke's body. The heavenly curse seal, which was originally sealed by Kakashi, was also in a state of activation. Sasuke's face was also covered with this tadpole-like black pattern, and Sasuke's skin, which was covered by the black pattern, also became a little gray color, which was very scary. The 4 sound ninjas stared at Sasuke tightly, and they were very surprised. These 4 people all have curses on their bodies, but even if they have awakened to the second state of curses, they don't have the powerful momentum of the first state of heavenly curse seal in the semi-activated state on Sasuke's body. "I said, didn't you hear what I said? You are just here to perform your task and bring me to Orochimaru's location. If you can't do it, I don't mind cleaning you up one by one, and then go to Orochimaru." Sasuke changed his previous arrogance and unapproachable. Instead, he became extraordinarily arrogant. Obviously, it was a subjective change to make himself grow smoothly in Orochimaru's camp. Although the 4 sound ninjas weren't good people, they were very clear about Orochimaru's importance to Sasuke. They also knew that Sasuke may become their new leader after a certain degree of training. So they patiently explained to Sasuke how to activate the second state of Heavenly Curse Seal and some subsequent arrangements. Although Sasuke was slightly surprised that activating the second state of Heavenly Curse Seal required people to fake their death, he still agreed to this arrangement. He took the pill and laid down in the wooden barrel brought by the four sound ninjas. Sakura, who was in the wood leaf, also found her other teammate, Uzumaki Naruto, after a painful struggle. She informed Naruto that Sasuke wanted to leave the wood leaf. Watergate was also a home. He heard that the matter involved the descendants of the Uchiha clan and Orochimaru, one of the Sannin, and also took it seriously. After repeatedly telling Naruto not to act without authorization, he immediately changed his clothes and summoned some ninjas to the Hokage office to select personnel to rescue and intercept the Sound Ninja. In Sakura's face, Naruto decisively violated the orders of his father, Watergate, and went directly to the houses of several friends who had a good relationship with him. He called them out and started the drama of the 12 roaches of the wood leaf, incomplete version, united with the 3 Sand siblings, changed clothes, vs. the 4 Sound ninjas, plus Kimimaro. There's no need to talk about the various stories one by one. We only need to know that most of the people in the wood leaf who were called by Naruto to recall Sasuke were seriously injured, and Naruto also returned to the wood leaf the next morning. Wood leaf also seemed to be preparing to add Sasuke to the list of traitors, but Naruto desperately let his father temporarily let Sasuke go and didn't add Sasuke's name to the list of Umbu's crusade forces. After the dust settled, Xianxia also quietly came to the Hokage office. Standing in the Hokage office, Watergate was sitting in his seat and looking at Xianxia with a smile. Before Sasuke left the wood leaf, the last place he visited was your house. It seems that you should be very familiar with all this. So why didn't you stop this little Uchiha guy from leaving the wood leaf? Facing Watergate's question, Xianxia didn't feel ashamed at all. Instead, he said to Watergate, "Since Wood Leaf betrayed me, I decided not to work for a village like Wood Leaf anymore. Between you and me, it's just some transactional cooperation, but Sasuke is my half-disciple. He wants to grow and become stronger. What reason do I have to stop him?" Chapter 322. Xianxia didn't care about Wood Leaf at all, and Watergate also understood that Wood Leaf did wrong to Xianxia. So for a while, he didn't know what reason to find to refute Xianxia's words. He could only change the topic and continue to talk to Xianxia about Sasuke. Well, after all, Sasuke's matter has already happened. Wood Leaf has also done what they should do, and it can be regarded as the most benevolent. In fact, the only remaining descendant of Uchiha in Wood Leaf is also a big problem to some extent. I don't need to say some of the reasons. You should also understand. Although the Uchiha clan is not dominant, once Uchiha Sasuke knows something he shouldn't know, it will be very bad. After all, Sasuke and his brother are still very different. Watergate's words were a bit cruel, but it was also from the perspective of Wood Leaf Hokage. There was nothing to condemn, it's just that their positions were different. The brothers of the Uchiha family, who knows how many twists and turns after this to usher in the final stability. Although Xianxia and Sasuke have a lot of fate, it's just that. It's not enough for Xianxia to pour out his heart to Sasuke, so Xianxia didn't care much about how Watergate dealt with Sasuke. Instead, he said to Watergate, "You call me over so secretly. I don't think it's just to tell me how to deal with a child like Sasuke, who has a special identity, right? Let's talk business directly. How about it? Do you need my help?" Hearing Xianxia's words, Watergate smiled, and then said to Xianxia, "Indeed, the time has come. We do need to prepare to start the operation. As for your power over me, I don't need it for the time being. After all, Danzo is one of Wood Leaf's people. No matter if he is good or evil, he should be punished by Wood Leaf. I'm sure Xianxia isn't the kind of person who would stick to killing his enemies, right? So, when the time comes, you just need to follow us. When Danzo's side has a high-level combatant that restricts our movements, there's no need to rush to make a move." When Xianxia heard Watergate's words, he understood that Wood Leaf treated Danzo's matters as his own and did not want others to interfere. To Xianxia, as long as Danzo was no longer a threat to his family and friends, It did not matter if he died or was imprisoned for life. Nangongja cupped his hands slightly towards Watergate, then said, "That's good. As long as the situation calls for it, I'll naturally be on call. I'm also very interested in what will happen to Danzo in the end. Just let me know when the time comes. If there's nothing important, then I'll leave first." Wait. Seeing that Nangongja was about to leave, Watergate raised his hand to stop Nangongja from leaving. With a little embarrassment on his face, he said to Nangongja, "I do have something to trouble you with, just say it." Watergate stretched out his finger and scratched his eyebrows slightly, a little embarrassed. But after a few times, he continued, "You know, Naruto gathered a group of his companions before to stop Sasuke from betraying with Leaf. But the result was not so good. Many of Naruto's friends were seriously injured, and Naruto himself blamed himself for not being able to bring Sasuke back. During this time, the child's mood has become very depressed, and he is not like his original self at all. Xianxia and I have been persuading him for a long time, but the effect is not so good. After thinking about it, the only person in with Leaf who can persuade Naruto well and make him listen to his words is probably you. So, I hope you can come with me to my house and persuade Naruto. After all, he is my child. Seeing him so depressed every day makes my heart uncomfortable." In the end, even Nangongja could see the deep worry in Watergate's eyes. Although Naruto has always had some resistance to Minato, it's still a pity for him. But for his child, Watergate completely gave his everything to Naruto. Just like now, Watergate and Nangongja actually had a pure interest relationship. But for his child, Watergate could still put down his face and ask Nangongja for such a request. "Naruto." Nangongja whispered Naruto's name softly. In fact, Nangongja didn't want to have anything to do with Leaf anymore. The reason why he tried so hard to get rid of Danzo's threat was because the few girls who followed him liked the environment of Leaf very much. Moreover, he did have some grievances with Danzo that needed to be resolved. But since Minato had put it this way, it would be unreasonable for Nangongja to reject him. Therefore, after a brief silence, Nangongja nodded and said to Minato, "Let's go." Since Naruto is a little confused for the time being, I watched him grow up and was called uncle by him. Naturally, I should go and persuade him. "I don't know if you're going to go with me, or—" Nangongja said, glancing at the backlog of documents on Watergate's desk. Many of the documents had a big red stamp on the cover. Obviously, they were very urgent. Watergate also understood Nangongja's meaning. He smiled and said, "It can't be helped. There are indeed a lot of things during this time. I won't go with you. Xianxia is at home. During this time, because Team 7 is missing a member, she has been in a state of rest. You can go directly to my house to see Naruto." Speaking of Team 7's temporary rest, Nangongja naturally thought of Kakashi, who came to his house to eat and drink when he had nothing to do. During this time, Kakashi really seemed to have nothing to do at all. When it was time to eat, he would go to Nangongja's house with his group of psychic beasts called ninja dogs. They were actually pet dogs. They came to Nangongja's house to eat. In that case, I won't disturb you from dealing with official business. I will do my best for Naruto, but these are all knots in his heart. In the end, it still depends on whether Naruto can figure it out by himself. I believe that Naruto will be able to break free from this emotion. After all, he is the child of you and Xianxia. Like parents, like child. Naruto will never be unable to recover from this setback. He will not stop here. Chapter 3:23. No matter how outstanding a person is, once something involves their wife and children, they will lose their usual indifference and wisdom. Just like Watergate in the Hokage's office, how many people's lives are affected by a stroke of his pen? On the battlefield, he is invincible, rarely meeting an opponent, and is feared by many people. But when Naruto's situation has a problem, even Nangongja, who is not so close to him, can lower his status to ask for help. It is really emotional. After Nangongja left Watergate's office, he went straight to Watergate's house. The one who opened the door for Nangongja was naturally Watergate's wife, Xianxia. Seeing Xianxia, Xianxia immediately understood the purpose of Xianxia's visit. With a somewhat sad face, Xianxia took Xianxia to Naruto's room on the second floor and gently opened the door. Although the sky is a bit dark, Xianxia can still see Naruto sitting on the ground, holding his knees at the moment, and in front of Naruto, there is a group photo of Team 7. Naruto's eyes are a bit dull. Obviously, his mental state is not so good. Even with the strong physique brought by the Nine-Tails chakra, Naruto still looks very tired. Obviously, he hasn't had a good rest for a long time. No wonder Xianxia and Watergate are so worried, and even called Xianxia. Xianxia gave Xianxia a look, indicating for Xianxia to leave for a while. Then he opened the door and walked into Naruto's room. Xianxia deliberately pushed the door and walked, making it extremely easy to detect sound, but Naruto still didn't respond. Seeing that Naruto didn't respond at all, and didn't even say a word, Xianxia opened his mouth to talk to Naruto first. But Naruto beat him to it. "Uncle Xianxia, did you let Sasuke go?" Naruto's voice was a little trembling and hoarse, obviously because of his emotional fluctuations, and he hasn't drunk water for a while. Xianxia could imagine Naruto's feeling of being betrayed by someone close to him when Sasuke said that he supported Naruto's decision to leave the Woodleaf. When Naruto was very young, Xianxia accompanied Naruto. In that childhood without fatherly love, Xianxia undoubtedly occupied part of Naruto's father role to a certain extent. So, Sasuke's departure, his concealment, and acquiescence actually caused the most damage to Naruto. I won't make a decision for anyone, whether it's you or Sasuke. I just analyzed Sasuke's situation when he left the Woodleaf and stayed in the Woodleaf. And I believe that even without my opinion, Sasuke would still leave. After all, Sasuke has always been like this, extremely opinionated, especially when it comes to his own growth. So, I just respected Sasuke's decision. Xianxia was very casual about his own opinion and his role in Sasuke's departure from the Woodleaf matter. But Naruto was caught in his own strange circle and said to Xianxia, "Even so, Uncle, you still played a role in promoting him, didn't you? The three of us have experienced so much together, and we grew so smoothly and significantly when we were in the same team. Why did Sasuke have to leave the Woodleaf? He even didn't hesitate to throw himself into the hands of that madman Orochimaru. Things like strength, as long as you diligently practice, you can always improve, right? I also learned a ninjutsu called Rasengan from my father during this period of time, just to catch up with Sasuke's pace. Isn't this the way to endure? Compete with each other, promote each other, and then grow together." In the end, Naruto's voice was almost a roar, but it was deliberately covered up and became more low. But such a low roar had a deafening feeling, and it made people feel like their heart was being oppressed. Looking carefully at Naruto's eyes, Xianxia quickly found that there was some orange color in them. Xianxia, who was waiting downstairs for Xianxia, also quickly felt the Nine-Tails chakra, and the chakra on her body was also ready. Once Naruto showed signs of going berserk, she would immediately use the Uzumaki's ninjutsu to seal her child's movements. But Xianxia's eyes were full of worry and sadness when she looked at me. If it wasn't for the fact that she had no other choice, Xianxia wouldn't be willing to treat her child like this. But Xianxia was clear about Nine-Tails' ability. If there really was an accident, she must control her child. Naruto. Although Naruto's state was not very good, Xianxia still calmly continued to speak to Naruto. "You are not the god of this world. You can't arrange the trajectory of other people's lives. Sasuke has the obligation to be responsible for his own life. You don't need to worry about him. No matter how good your relationship with him is, no matter how much you understand each other, you are not him in the end. You won't understand his pain, and he won't understand your experience. What you can do is to live your own life and leave the right for others to choose," Xianxia said, and slowly pressed his hand on Naruto's shoulder, and a strand of internal energy began to pour into Naruto's body. To a certain extent, internal energy has a certain restraining effect on chakra. when Nangongja slowly injected his internal energy into Naruto's body. The surging chakra in Naruto's body also slowly calmed down. Although Kushina downstairs was also a little confused, it was obvious that Nine-Tails Chakra's aura had indeed disappeared, so she also calmed down the chakra at her body and waited for Nangongja's result. Naruto fell into a special state at this moment. At this moment, in Naruto's vision and perception, his room was no longer there, and Nangongja, who was pressing on his shoulder, was no longer there. At this moment, he seemed to be standing at the place where he and Sasuke fought before, the Valley of the Final with some colors of destiny. Sasuke had turned into the humanoid state of Seal 2, and his body was also wrapped in Nine-Tails Chakra to form a pair of Nikkang. He and Sasuke looked at each other across the waterfall. Chapter 3:24. Looking at Sasuke standing opposite him, Naruto didn't know what to say for a while. And in a trance, Sasuke, who was originally looking at him across the waterfall, suddenly appeared in front of him. The distance between the two was not even more than 1 meter. Naruto, seeing that Naruto didn't speak, Sasuke called out Naruto's name first. And Naruto was also stunned, because Naruto knew that everything in front of him now was not real. But the Sasuke in front of him looked so real that he couldn't figure it out. Naruto looked at Sasuke, but still decided to say something in his heart, regardless of whether the Sasuke in front of him was real or fake. Sasuke, I'm a very stupid guy. I don't know if you are real or fake in front of me now. In fact, I didn't like you very much, because compared to me, you were so dazzling. Everyone was overshadowed by your brilliance, excellent grades, handsome appearance, and learned a particularly powerful swordsmanship from Uncle Nangong. Whether it was the teacher or the students, they were so envious of you, and they were so jealous of you. They all have the same name for you, genius. When a person without talent sees an outstanding person, that kind of mentality of jealousy will inevitably emerge. At first, I couldn't see the emotions in my heart, but now I do understand that the name of those emotions is jealousy. But you were envied by so many people, and you were envied by so many people. But I didn't find a trace of happiness in you at all. Every day, you had a cold face, and you didn't seem to be so interested in everything. But sometimes, you would fall into an inexplicable state of contemplation. At that time, your eyes would be filled with pain. You would be like a severely injured beast, rejecting everyone who came close to you and unwilling to get close to anyone else. That was a kind of, how to say it, deep loneliness. Later, we were assigned to a team. In Team 7, we were almost together day and night. Slowly, I found that you were not so annoying. You were also a person who was willing to be injured in order to protect your teammates. When you saw a strong opponent, you would be excited to tremble. In the battles and days of getting along with each other, I slowly regarded you as my partner, my best friend. But you still left. Even if I said that I would break your hands and feet to bring you back, even if I used the combination of Nine-Tails Chakra and Rasengan that I couldn't fully control, I still couldn't bring you back to Wood Leaf. Uncle Nangong said that all of this was your choice. I was not qualified to make their decisions for anyone. I know that Uncle Nangong was right, but I was still very unwilling. My closest friend, my closest companion, suddenly left me without giving me any reason to convince me. I really can't accept it. When the words came out of his mouth, Naruto also felt that his state had changed. His body, which was originally wearing pajamas, had now changed into his usual battle clothes. Violent and endless Nine-Tails Chakra burst out from his body, and a Rasengan filled with Nine-Tails Chakra and Wind Attribute Chakra appeared on his right hand. Just like the scene when he fought with Sasuke in the final valley. And Sasuke, who just stood opposite him and just said a sentence, was now staring at Naruto with his eyes. His originally pitch-black eyes have turned into the strongest state of the 3 Tomo Sharingan. The 3 Tomo Sharingan. You asked me the reason? Sasuke looked at Naruto. His voice was a little gloomy and hoarse. He seemed to be trying to restrain his emotions. My reason is very simple. Because Wood Leaf is no longer suitable for me. Although there is a comfortable life and companions like you in Woodleaf, these are not what I pursue. In the beginning, I always hoped that I could become strong enough to find out the truth of everything, enough to recover the things I lost. But gradually, I did find out that these are the reasons I found for myself. I'm not a person who is particularly obsessed with these things in my heart. I'm so simple and eager for power. I'm eager to have something in my hands, no longer a marionette in the hands of others, no longer a chess piece in the hands of others that could be discarded at any time. This kind of mood made me willing to abandon my companions and made me willing to run to Orochimaru's hands to take risks. Because I'm fed up with my own powerlessness. I'm fed up with someone always standing on top of my head and controlling me. I want to change. I want to become that hand. Sasuke said, and the look of suppression disappeared. Originally scarlet Sharingan, at this moment, the white part of the eye was covered with blood. That look was enough to see the madness in Sasuke's heart. And Naruto seemed to be frightened by the appearance of Sasuke in front of him. The distorted face and the deformed body because of the second state of the curse seal made Sasuke look like a devil who climbed out of hell and wanted to overthrow everything and rebuild everything. Gradually, Naruto only felt that his eyes were blurred for a while, and everything in Naruto's eyes began to become illusory, until finally his consciousness fell into a deep pool and a strong fatigue attacked his brain. On the first floor of Watergate's house, Xianxia and Xianxia sat on the sofa. A cup of hot tea and a few dishes of snacks were placed in front of Xianxia and Xianxia. Obviously, Xianxia took them out to entertain Xianxia. Naruto, is he okay? Xianxia asked Xianxia with some apprehension. Obviously, she had endured for a long time before asking this question to Naruto. Don't worry, Xianxia smiled, which also made Xianxia's mood slightly relaxed. The reason why Naruto is in such a bad state this time is indeed because of Sasuke's sudden departure from the village. On the other hand, it's also because before this, he used the Nine Tails chakra, which was beyond his control, on me. Although the chakra that was mobilized by Naruto has returned to the Nine Tails body, there's still some remnants that affect Naruto's mood. I suppressed the residual chakra in Naruto's body with my own internal strength and used a little hypnosis technique to push Naruto into a deep sleep. According to my inference, Naruto will wake up tomorrow morning, and there won't be any impact. You can rest assured. Chapter 325. In the forest outside Woodleaf, it was still so quiet. But today's silence was a bit too much. There wasn't even the sound of birds or insects. It was like the autumn wind had swept through this huge forest at this moment, returning everything to its most primitive state. But in the dark corner of the forest, it was very lively at this moment. A shadow passed by, and Watergate and Xianxia just stood a little farther away from this noisy place. After the incident of the Uchiha clan, 3 generations, he ordered the elimination of Root and the removal of Danzo from the position of Hokage's assistant. However, it was only a nominal disbandment. Root would use extremely cruel brainwashing methods on their own people, so their cohesion had reached an inhuman level. Today we have found most of Root's bases in Woodleaf, but there must be some Root members left in the outside world. It's really pitiful for these people who were persecuted by Root. It wasn't until today that I have enough strength to eliminate Root. Watergate looked at the large forest in front of him with some pity. Under this forest is the largest base of Root in Woodleaf. Since he has decided to eliminate Root, Watergate is naturally prepared. No matter the size of Woodleaf's base, as long as it is Root's base, ninjas loyal to Watergate are gathering. As long as the appointed time is reached, these people will directly enter Root's base. The number of Jonin participating in this operation is very large. The 3 clan heads of Inoshikicho are all present. Hatake Kakashi and my guy are also participating in this operation. Kurenai, Yuan Fei, Asuma, and other Jonin loyal to Watergate, as well as the Umbu under Watergate's direct command, are already outside the other bases at this moment, waiting for the opportunity to attack. This war Root will not be able to escape. Looking at Watergate's compassionate look, Nangongja didn't think that Watergate is so noble. From Watergate's words, it is enough to prove that Root's actions are actually clear to Woodleaf's higher-ups. But over the years, Root has never been eliminated, and even became stronger. Why? The reason is that although Root's actions are very ruthless, they still bring enough benefits to Woodleaf. Many things that are not suitable for Woodleaf to do are solved by Root. Some people who need to be killed, but don't know who killed them. Some experiments involving human relations. A lot of such shady tasks are carried out by Root. Therefore, Woodleaf's higher-ups are reluctant to directly eliminate Root. Even if the Hokage gave the order, the people under him didn't do anything, so that Root was almost unaffected and even buried deeper in the ground. This time, if it wasn't for Watergate and Narashikaku's eloquence to persuade most of Woodleaf's higher-ups, this operation is very likely to be unfinished. For the group of people in charge of Woodleaf, you can use the power in your hands to seize benefits for yourself, accumulate wealth, and even do more things that are unacceptable to ordinary people. But the premise of all this is to ensure the interests of Woodleaf. The damage caused by Orochimaru's invasion is obvious to all. Although the Sand took the initiative to surrender and recovered some losses for Woodleaf, the Land of Wind itself is a remote place. How much can they compensate? More importantly, Woodleaf was invaded at such a time, which made Woodleaf's strength decline in the eyes of many clients. This could be seen from the obvious drop in the commission rate during this period of time. These things naturally have to push out a person to take the blame. Orochimaru alone is not enough, so Danzo was logically abandoned. Boom! Hundreds of meters in front of Watergate and Nangongja, a huge explosion sounded. The sky was filled with huge gray and orange flames. This is the phenomenon when the barrier is forcibly broken, and it is also the attack signal agreed by many ninjas attacking Root. Kill! 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 In all the hidden places of Woodleaf, at this moment, there were shouts of killing. At this moment, it was already late at night. Who knows how many people who were sleeping were suddenly awakened by the sudden appearance of a huge explosion and the shouts of killing around Woodleaf. In front of Nangongja, Woodleaf ninjas and Root ninjas were fighting fiercely. Root's level of brainwashing and teaching is really good. But even so, a Root ninja can block 2 Woodleaf ninjas. But can he block the pincer attack of 3 Woodleaf ninjas? Root, after all, is a secret organization, and after the 3 generations issued the order to ban Root, Root also lost its righteous name. Although there are some new members joining over the years, they still can't keep up with the high death rate and disability rate of Root. Root is indeed in a state of lack of manpower, and its strength is weak. Watergate can be said to have chosen a good time to attack Root. Nangongja looked at the battlefield in front of him, and for a moment he remembered his state of mind during the Shinobi World War. The blood that had cooled down a little because of taking charge of Bloodcloth Pavilion and hibernating in Woodleaf Village was now ignited again. How many years has it been since Nangongja had a good fight? Even during the previous Woodleaf collapse plan, Nangongja gave most of the fighting to others. Even the battle with the Chibi Shikaku was mostly led by Li Yong. The reason was that Nangongja felt that there was no need for him to fight, but at this moment, Nangongja was fighting against his enemy, Root. In the end, Nangongja is actually a guy who holds grudges, and all kinds of bad relationships with Root made Nangongja unable to bear it anymore. With one hand on the hilt of his sword, Nangongja jumped and joined the battlefield. Most of the ninjas who are loyal to Watergate on the battlefield are veteran jonin, so they are naturally interested in Nangongja the Yama, who shone in the Shinobi World War. Over the years, Nangongja hasn't fought in public, and everyone is very curious about Nangongja's strength, so they all paid attention to Nangongja's fight. Even Watergate is watching Nangongja closely, hoping to see how strong Nangongja is. After all, Nangongja doesn't practice chakra, and his main attack method is his own exquisite swordsmanship. Only by seeing it with one's own eyes can you see some of the mysteries. Chapter 326. When Nangongzhi jumped into the battlefield, there wasn't any sword energy as usual. Instead, it was very calm, like a drop of water in a lake. Even the ripples were difficult to detect. Nangongzhi was no longer as arrogant and domineering as before. He simply held his heavenly calamity sword and walked through the battlefield as if he was taking a stroll. But even so, no one could overlook Nangongzhi's slightly skinny figure, because this person was the person who had been given the title of Yama back then. Such a title was naturally accumulated through the accumulation of human lives. Such a person can't be ignored at will even if he doesn't show his strength. Finally, Nangongzhi slowly walked to the center of the battlefield. Looking around, Root Shinobi and Konoha Shinobi were fighting each other everywhere. But as Nangongzhi gradually walked to the center of the battlefield, Root ninjas and with Leaf ninjas spontaneously began to slowly withdraw from the battle at this moment. Wood Leaf ninjas gradually stood behind Nangongzhi, and Root ninjas naturally stood opposite Nangongzhi. You all come together. Nangongzhi didn't feel any tension because he was facing countless Root ninjas. He just said to the many ninjas on the opposite side. Root ninjas are naturally not emotional people, but Wood Leaf ninjas heard Nangongzhi's words and naturally respected Nangongzhi's decision. They all took half a step back and clenched their weapons, ready to support at any time. Looking at their companions, the Root ninjas also made up their minds. Facing a single target like Nangongzhi, it's not advisable to just use ninjutsu to attack because it can be easily dodged and it will consume a lot of chakra. The loss is not worth it. Most of the Root ninjas facing Nangongzhi casually pulled out their weapons and rushed towards Nangongzhi. Of course, some Root ninjas quietly hid their bodies, ready to kill Nangongzhi at any time when Nangongzhi didn't have time to react. Most ninjas are good at surprise attacks, and speed is naturally an important factor in a surprise attack. Every Root ninja that was rushing towards Nangongzhi was trying their best to increase their speed, leaving after images in the air due to their high-speed movement. Nangongzhi's sword-like eyebrows slightly raised. The tribulation sword in his hand was also pulled out of the scabbard by Nangongzhi. The sound of the blade and scabbard rubbing against each other was very clear, like a dragon's roar, echoing on the battlefield. Ah! With a soft shout, Nangongzhi swung his sword towards the Root ninja rushing towards him. The speed of the blade was faster than the speed of the Root ninja, and in the blink of an eye, Nangongzhi's tribulation sword was already on the body of the Root ninja in front of him. A huge wound extended from the left shoulder to the right waist of the Root ninja, blood staining the Root ninja's clothes red, as if he was wearing a kasaya. Nangongzhi's move was the most basic kasaya chop. When Nangongzhi first started practicing swordsmanship, he focused on the subtlety and flexibility of swordsmanship. Every day, Nangongzhi tried his best to make his swordsmanship more complex and unpredictable. So he practiced hard day after day, constantly learning various swordsmanship to increase the number of swordsmanship he knew. At that time, the Shinobi World War also provided Nangongzhi with a lot of opportunities to practice swordsmanship, and it was also because of these many killings that Nangongzhi made a name for himself as Yama. But after the war ended, Nangongzhi gradually lost the opportunity to fight, and his restless heart naturally calmed down. Nangongzhi finally had the opportunity to fully examine his shortcomings, and found that his strength had reached a bottleneck. It was impossible to get out of this predicament just by relying on the accumulation of swordsmanship, so Nangongzhi began to slowly discover the existence of swordsmanship. And then, after a long day of thinking, he finally came to a conclusion, and that is potential. There is a time when a person's strength is limited, and heaven and earth do not exist. No matter how strong a person is, he will be limited by his own body's aptitude and be limited to a limited range. But heaven and earth are boundless. The size of the sky is unknown, and the thickness of the earth is unknown. The power called potential that Nangongzhi thought of was to connect his body with heaven and earth and borrow the power of heaven and earth. In other words, using the power of heaven and earth called natural energy The power of Heaven's disaster sword that can connect with natural energy is the key to Nangong's potential. It is precisely because of this that Nangongja can use swordsmanship so exquisitely. Over the years, Nangongja gradually used this weapon called potential more and more ingeniously, and now it has reached the point where the sword domain is 5 meters around him. As long as it is within 5 meters of Nangongja's body, almost every place is under the control of Nangongja. As long as Nangongja wants, his sword can appear anywhere. Gently waving his Heaven's disaster sword, scarlet blood turned into a line of blood that floated on the ground. Putting his sword back into the scabbard, he walked step by step towards the direction of the Root Ninjas. The Root Ninjas also know that in a one-on-one battle, they have no way to kill Nangongja, so they all join together and rush towards Nangongja. Every time a ninja enters within 5 meters of Nangongja, a sharp sword light will appear beside him, and a line of blood will appear on his neck, and he will lose his life. And all of this, in the eyes of the people next to him, is just Nangongja gently flicking his fingers with the hand holding the sword. Seizing an elite that Root has painstakingly cultivated is just such a simple thing. Naturally, Konoha's ninjas behind Nangong Zetsu also saw it clearly, and they all shouted one after another. Nangong-sama is mighty. Yama-sama really deserves his reputation. Standing behind the wood leaf ninjas, Watergate also noticed the cheers in front of him, and after asking about the situation, his eyes also lit up. Nangongja, this kind of power must be in my hands. As long as I can have Nangongja to cooperate with me, then Wood Leaf will definitely prosper in my hands. Chapter 327. Every Root Ninja who rushed towards Nangongja fell to the ground in an instant, blood spurting out from their severed necks. Gradually, even the soil couldn't completely absorb the blood. The blood gradually gathered into a shallow puddle, and around the puddle, there was still a lot of blood flowing into the puddle. From this, it can be seen how many Root Ninjas have already lost their lives in the hands of Nangongja. The people of Root have never been afraid of death, but this kind of worthless death really made the ninjas of Root feel very cold. After all, their companions rushed forward one after another and lost their lives one by one, and in exchange, Nangongja just flicked his finger. The price and the reward were simply not proportional. Such a situation really made many Root Ninjas feel cold. Minato Watergate. Fourth Hokage. How dare you bully me? How dare you bully my Root? A slightly old voice suddenly resounded in the battlefield. Nangongja heard this familiar voice, and his eyes finally flashed. The Root Ninjas who rushed within 5 meters of Nangongja didn't seem to be affected by Nangongja's invisible slash. Just as they were about to attack, they found that Nangongja was looking at their eyes. Strange, isn't it? Obviously, Nangongja only has a pair of eyes, but every Root Ninja felt that Nangongja's gaze penetrated their eyes. Nangongja's eyes were so cold that every Root Ninja who had sealed their emotions to a certain extent felt a chill in their hearts. Nangongja was obviously full of flaws, and the terrifying sword domain just now no longer existed. But no Root Ninja dared to step forward and attack Nangongja. Ishimura-sama, that's not right. How did I bully you? How did I bully your Root? What is the reason for all this? And what is the reason for the situation to reach this point? You and I are both well aware of it. Why do you have to say such childish words? Watergate, who was standing in the distance, suddenly appeared beside Nangongja. Watergate had a slight smile on his face, and he looked at Danzo, standing opposite him, with a bit of mockery in his eyes. Shimura Danzo and the 3 generations were of the same generation, and the 3 generations were already old and had white hair. Danzo himself now looked a little old. Although his body still looked relatively strong, his white hair looked a little old. Looking at himself, he's only in his 30s, almost 40 years old. This is the peak of a ninja's life. With this kind of strength, how can Danzo compete with the young and strong 4th Hokage for power and profit? It seems, Hokage-sama, You seem to think that you can defeat me? I don't know where your confidence comes from. Is it the ninjas you brought with you, or the man called Yama, who came with you?" Danzo didn't seem to be aware of how dangerous his situation was, and he still stood firmly opposite Watergate with his cane. "Aren't you underestimating me and my roots a little too much? As the Hokage, you should naturally know how much resources our root has consumed over the years. Moreover, what you know is only some information on the books. How could we not have gained anything after so many years? What's more, you're already at our doorstep, and you're trying to wipe out our roots. Regardless of whether these methods are useful or not, we naturally have to give it a try. Well, you've been delaying for so long. Presumably no matter what kind of methods you have, you should be almost ready, right? Whether it's a mule or a horse, just take it out and show it to us." Minato knew very well that the reason why Danzo talked so much with him was to distract him, and at the same time, to buy some time for his backup plan. It wasn't that Watergate hadn't thought of stopping Danzo's preparations in advance, but if he directly destroyed Danzo's backup plan, he didn't know what kind of crazy things the exasperated Danzo would do. It would be better to do what he was doing now and deal with every move as they came, limiting the damage to the wood leaf as much as possible. He glanced at Xianxia. The two of them exchanged glances, and it seemed like they had some sort of communication. Xianxia took a few steps forward and spoke to Danzo. "I don't know if the busy Danzo Sama still remembers a small character like me. Back then, Lord Danzo Sama could be said to be high and mighty. You planted your own people around me to monitor me, and when you wanted to control me, you simply kidnapped my family. For the sake of my family, you and I could be considered to have fought a battle back then. But because of this, I also left the wood leaf and drifted away. It's fine that I don't have a fixed residence, but my sister and my family have left this place that has occupied almost all of my memories, just like an undeserved calamity. Danzo Sama, do you know how much I wanted you to experience this feeling of anger and powerlessness at that time? Do you know?" As he spoke, Xianxia's face became distorted, as if he was really exasperated. He pulled out the Heaven's Calamity sword from his hand. The dark blade was now emitting a moonlight-like brilliance. Xianxia's sudden attack also startled the guards standing beside Danzo. After all, the battle between Xianxia and the root ninjas was still vivid in their minds. Xianxia's combat power is really terrifying. Danzo still looked coldly at Xianxia's sudden attack, as if he saw something interesting. Danzo had already investigated Xianxia's temperament a few years ago. Danzo found Xianxia's current behavior very amusing. With a gentle wave of his hand, several figures quickly rushed out from behind Danzo. These people were wrapped in black clothes, and their aura was very strange. Xianxia's strength is already at the Kage level, but suddenly being entangled by 10 of these strange root ninjas, he couldn't get away. Even under the pressure of 10 root ninjas, he gradually left the central battlefield. Chapter 328. Xianxia looked at the 10 strange ninjas from Root standing around him, and the anger and embarrassment he felt from being forced to come here disappeared in an instant. This attack on Root was originally led by Watergate and the Wood Leaf Ninjas as the main force. Xianxia said that he was here to help, but in fact, he was here to support the situation, and he would only make a move when there was no other choice. Just like now, Danzo obviously had some powerful backup plan, so Xianxia naturally had to seize the opportunity to be dragged here by these fierce-looking ninjas and naturally leave the battlefield. It was precisely because of this that Xianxia was helplessly brought here by these ninjas. "Then, let me see what you are," Xianxia said, and the tribulation sword in his hand suddenly came out of its sheath. The sword domain that was so powerful just now was activated again at this moment, and it was activated under the premise that the tribulation sword was completely unsheathed, so the power of the sword domain was naturally multiplied. The sword flashed, and the mask on the face of the man in black closest to Xianxia was cut off. The mask naturally couldn't withstand the sharpness of the sword, and the entire mask was now a tattered piece of cloth hanging on the face of the root ninja opposite Nangongja. The face under the mask made Nangongja feel a little speechless, because it didn't look like a normal person's face at all. His complexion was so pale that it looked like he had been burned by sulfur. His face was filled with wrinkles, and his skin was extremely loose. His eyes had also turned into a lifeless gray color. Can this kind of thing still be called a human? Nangongja looked at them and asked himself, but he couldn't come up with an answer. Because no matter how Nangongja looked at them, these strange ninjas from Root didn't look like humans. Seemingly aware of Nangongja's obvious indifference and disregard for their lives, the 10 strange ninjas roared loudly at this moment. The ninja opposite Nangongja didn't have a mask covering his face, so his open mouth was clearly seen by Nangongja. It was a mouth with 3 layers of mouth parts, and the tongue inside was also very different from that of ordinary people. If one had to compare, it was more like the tongue of a lizard, and it looked like it was deliberately contracted. Ghost! Ninja! The 10 ninjas roared at the sky at the same time, and their mouths simultaneously shouted such a name. Are these your names? Ninja. Sure enough, they don't look like humans at all. Although their bodies are full of vitality, their minds are in a complete mess. Maybe they're just guys who are ordered by someone. Looking at you living so miserably, it's better to let me help you ascend to paradise early. Ignoring the roars of these ninjas, Nangongja directly rushed toward one of the ninjas with his speed. Although the ninjas' minds were in a mess, they used their instincts to the extreme. Although their eyes couldn't clearly see Nangongja's moving figure, they still subconsciously jumped back and avoided Nangongja's sword. The sword has a shape, so naturally it can be dodged, and can also be perceived by people with keen perception. But what about the invisible sword energy? Originally, because he avoided Nangongja's sword, the ninja's face was a bit happy. After all, he broke free from the threat of death. But immediately, his abdomen, which had clearly avoided the attack, became a mess of flesh and blood. The ninjas themselves didn't have pain nerves, but their bodies suddenly suffered such an attack, so the ninjas couldn't react for a while. Nangongja didn't care about the ninja's mood change in front of him, but his eyes were closely staring at the wound on the ninja's abdomen. Black and red granulation was constantly emerging from the wound. The wounds caused by the sword chi had sword chi remaining on them to heal. Now, the ghost ninja's abdomen was healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. It's hard to imagine how terrifying the ninja's recovery ability would be if there was no restriction of the sword energy. Sure enough, the rich life aura I felt didn't exist for no reason. This life aura is contained in the ninjas' bodies, suppressing the ninjas' pain nerves, and at the same time, significantly increasing their healing ability. A weapon that doesn't fear pain and can recover quickly? It's really interesting. I don't know where this rich life aura came from. Just relying on the research of Root to cultivate such a powerful life form is simply a fantasy. Nangongja gradually became interested in these 10 ninjas surrounding him. He just wanted to use them to leave the center of the battlefield as soon as possible. But he didn't expect to encounter such an interesting thing. On the other side of the battlefield, Watergate looked at the huge, bloated existence in front of him, and he was slightly stunned. The monster was like an amalgamation of rotting flesh. A rancid smell was so pungent that the rotting flesh vaguely formed the limbs and face of the monster. Just now, Watergate used his flying thunder god technique to cross space and appeared above the monster in front of him, and fiercely pressed his signature Rasengan. There is clearly a huge bloody hole in the monster's body, but in the blink of an eye, the bloody hole was mended by granulation sprouting out from the surrounding flesh. Watergate naturally didn't believe it. He thought that this monster must have some kind of core or vital point. Then he also pressed a Rasengan on the monster's face. But the result was the same. Even if the monster's head was hit, it still recovered in an instant. But Watergate faintly saw some clues, this kind of recovery ability. It's just like, Danzo, you dare to do such a thing? You are simply deceiving your master and destroying your ancestors. Watergate looked at Danzo very angrily. Danzo's behavior was also known by Watergate, but he didn't think that Danzo would dare to deceive his master and destroy his ancestors. So what? The dead are already dead. Since that's the case, why not let their legacy play its role? Let's see just how powerful is this weapon that was created with their inheritance. Even if you are the Hokage, aren't you helpless at this moment? Chapter 329. That's right. Whether it's the 10 shinobi standing around Xianxia or the huge rotten meat monster standing in front of Watergate, they all came from the legacy of a strong wood leaf, the cells of the first Hokage, Senju Takuma. Whether it's their pale skin or their extraordinary recovery speed, they are all products of Root's research on replicating the first Hokage. Whether it's the shinobi or the giant beast, they are all products of failure. Over the years, Root has perfectly replicated only one shinobi with the first Hokage's genes. But although this person can use wood release, the effect is very weak, and he doesn't have the power of the first Hokage. Root has also stopped this research, but the failed products like the shinobi and the giant beast are still left behind. Just now, when facing the attacks from Minato and Xianxia, he saw that his roots were about to be destroyed. Danzo finally remembered these failed experiments. On the one hand, he let his researchers debug these failed products. On the other hand, he came out to delay Watergate's attack, so that his people can deal with the important information in the base that can't be leaked. Roar, roar! The giant beast in front of Watergate suddenly roared towards the sky, and the mouth made of rotten meat on its face instantly opened, and a fishy smell came out of the mouth of the giant beast. Moreover, there were a few sticky things connecting the upper and lower lips of the giant beast, which made people feel an instinctive sense of disgust from the bottom of their hearts. Naturally, Minato wouldn't just sit there and wait for his death. It would be troublesome to deal with such a giant beast with his own strength. And the most important thing was that this giant beast's size wasn't that easy to stop. So at this moment, Watergate's hands flew up and down, and a ninjutsu was completed in an instant. He gently bit the skin of his thumb, and a drop of blood flowed out from the wound. Leaving a trace of blood on his palm, Watergate pressed his palm on the ground, and a string of spells spread out from the place where Watergate's palm pressed. Summoning Jutsu. Toad Gamabunta, lend me your power. The smoke rose, but it dissipated in an instant. A toad wearing a short coat, a short sword on his back, and a huge pipe in his mouth suddenly appeared in the empty forest at this moment. Watergate boy, you really don't think of me if there's no trouble. This disgusting and ragged fellow seems to be quite troublesome to deal with. If I were to use my own dagger to hack such a fellow, I'm really worried that my dagger wouldn't be clean enough. Toad Gamabunta looked at the giant beast in front of him with disdain. He was even worried that the giant beast's flesh would make a short sword wouldn't be able to clean it. He simply didn't put the giant beast in his eyes. Roar, roar! After a loud roar, he charged straight towards Toad Gamabunta. After Watergate summoned Toad Gamabunta, he stood on top of his head and said loudly to Toad Gamabunta, "There's no choice, boss. This guy's body is a huge threat. I naturally don't care about him, but with his recovery speed and body size, if he really enters the wood leaf, the damage he can cause wouldn't be less than 9 tails. And I should just kill this guy here and not let him have a chance to damage the wood leaf." Toad Gamabunta was very close to Watergate. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been summoned by Watergate and even allowed Watergate to stand on top of his head. Toad Gamabunta was naturally clear of Watergate's ambitions. The wood leaf was something that Watergate must protect. Thus, Toad Gamabunta removed the pipe from his mouth and tapped on the tobacco before keeping it in his bosom. Using his own claws, he extended his hands to the hilt of his short blade, slowly unsheathing it and placing it in front of his body. One hand on the hilt, the other hand lightly pressed on the blade's spine. Evidently, he was displaying an extremely high-level blade technique. Mystic Wood Mountain's secret technique, water severing blade. Toad Gamabunta's originally round eyes opened even wider at this moment. The short blade in his hand spun around half a circle. The hand that was originally pressing on the blade spine also slowly brushed the blade's edge. Chakra continuously poured into the blade from the hand that was brushing the blade's edge. Toad Bunta raised the dagger up high, so high that it was even higher than his head. A loud roar resounded through the sky, and the dark clouds that had been slightly covering Ming Yu's face seemed to have dispersed in an instant. The short blade in Toad Bunta's hand fiercely pierced into the ground. Spiderweb cracks with white light appeared on the ground. No, it wasn't white light, but streams of highly compressed water spurting out. These streams of water emitted white light because of the moonlight's illumination. Gradually, these streams of water seemed to be under immense pressure as they shot towards the sky. Toad Gamabunta also exerted all his strength to pull out the short blade from the ground, slashing towards the sky. As the short blade was pulled out, the originally compressed streams of water completely exploded out. Because of the strength and direction of Toad Gamabunta's blade, these high-pressure streams of water rushed towards the gigantic beast. When these streams of water hit its body, the gigantic beast was gradually unable to resist. The rotting flesh on the gigantic beast's body started to fall off piece by piece under the scouring of the high-speed streams of water, being carried away by the streams of water. Visible to the naked eye, the gigantic beast's body started to shrink. The originally extremely intimidating roar also became softer and softer. The streams of water continued to forcefully scour the gigantic beast's body, but Toad Gamabunta's expression became increasingly unsightly. Because even though a portion of these streams of water came from underground water, whether it was the high pressure or the external streams of water, they were all maintained by Toad Gamabunta's chakra and water escape technique. Right now, Toad Gamabunta was actually nearing his limit. Watergate naturally understood this point. Thus, Watergate also slowly raised his right hand and placed it in front of his chest. Originally, this was a technique that I researched for the future Naruto, but I didn't expect to use it at this time. Chapter 330. Watergate controlled his chakra and condensed it in the palm of his right hand. Slowly, a blue chakra sphere appeared in Watergate's palm. Watergate's signature ninjutsu, Rasengan, appeared in Watergate's hand. However, the amount of chakra that Watergate released didn't decrease because of the formation of Rasengan. Instead, it became more and more. Around the Rasengan, which had begun to stabilize, a chakra was constantly rotating and entangling around the Rasengan because of the excessive infusion. Watergate also gathered the Rasengan in his hand high above his head. The volume of the Rasengan slowly began to expand. The huge amount of chakra made every ninja who was around the battlefield feel palpitations. Should it be said that Watergate was worthy of his reputation? This man, who was praised by almost all ninjas as the most suitable ninja for me at this moment, actually used such a terrible, self-developed ninjutsu, which was a huge shock to many ninjas. My child was born with a chakra capacity that was beyond ordinary people. When he officially graduated as a genin, his chakra capacity had exceeded the total amount of chakra of ordinary jonin. I considered that it would be difficult for a child to control such a huge amount of chakra in his body, not to mention that there was a more important existence that constantly disturbed my child's control of chakra. Since there was no way to do it carefully, then I had to do it with extreme violence. After I figured out this point, I began to try to inject a large amount of chakra into the Rasengan. In this way, the power of the Rasengan could be improved. I called this ninjutsu Otama Rasengan. A huge chakra sphere with a diameter of nearly 2 meters was held in the palm of Watergate's hand. A strong wind was generated around Watergate because of the rotation of the Otama Rasengan. Watergate was wearing a white haori with flames on his body. The words Yandame Hokage on Watergate's back were so dazzling at this moment. Watergate lightly jumped on top of Gamabunta's head, and his whole person was like a falcon gliding in the sky. He held the Odama Rasengan in his hand and pressed it towards the giant beast that was struggling in the high-pressure water flow. The huge chakra that was originally compressed in the Odama Rasengan instantly burst out. The high-pressure water flow and the remains of the giant beast rotated together, and the giant beast's body began to slowly distort and blur until it disappeared. After Gamabunta said goodbye to Watergate, he turned into a huge cloud of smoke and disappeared. Watergate also stood in front of Danzo in an instant, holding his special kunai in his hand and looking at Danzo with hostility. I didn't expect you to have grown to this point. Danzo looked at Watergate's great power in front of him, and the guards around him who had been trained by him to have no feelings at all at this moment because of the powerful strength shown by Watergate. Their legs were slightly trembling because of the fear of death in their hearts. Danzo knew that he was defeated this time. Although he is not without the power to fight back in life-saving means, there's a limit to the number of times he can use these means, and he can't use them indefinitely. Now there are at least thousands of ninjas loyal to Watergate around him, and among them, there are not only Kage-level ninjas like Watergate and Xianxia, but there are also many Jonin-level ninjas. Even if he can save himself once or twice, how can he save himself 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times? At this moment, Danzo already had the heart to retreat, and he made a few gestures behind his back, indicating his subordinates to prepare to retreat. So, several people standing behind Danzo slowly retreated. Originally, more than a dozen people surrounded Danzo to protect his safety, and it looked very imposing, but now only Danzo stood there alone, and it looked like a lonely hero. Danzo, surrender. Seeing that you have solved many difficult problems for Woodleaf for many years, I promise that I won't hurt your life. Even if it's a ninja from Root, I will still grant freedom to those who are kind after screening them. Standing opposite Danzo, Watergate put forward his own conditions. The reason why Watergate and Root are fighting is because the existence of Root hinders Watergate's centralization of power in Woodleaf, and it is obvious that Root is the most despised person in many things, so dealing with Root has become a matter of course. Minato Watergate, the fourth Hokage, Shimura Danzo, set foot on the battlefield decades ago in order to protect Woodleaf. Like the 3 generations that each of you admires so much, I am also the disciple of the first and second Hokage. You are standing here one by one, saying that I betrayed Woodleaf, that I am the sinner of Woodleaf. But have you ever thought that without me, without Root, will Woodleaf still be the quiet and peaceful place in your eyes? Will Woodleaf still be as pure and flawless as in your eyes? It is me. It is Root who carried the darkness of Woodleaf on my own. This world has always been a place where there is light, there is shadow, there is a surface, there is a part that is covered. Woodleaf is a raging flame, and it will also produce a lot of shadows. You want to eliminate all the shadows, but without the shadows, will the so-called light still be light? When Danzo said this, whether it was the Woodleaf ninjas who followed Watergate or the ninjas who originally belonged to Root, at this moment, their eyes were slightly moved. Ninjas themselves are a group of people who live in the darkness, and the dark side of the world is their habitat. So what Danzo said is indeed something that everyone can see with their own eyes. So we have to surrender to the darkness that you said must exist? Watergate listened to Danzo's words. In fact, there was a faint change in his heart. From this, it can be seen that Danzo's personal charisma and strong temptation is a person with a strong personality. In order not to let people's hearts waver, Watergate also refuted. We do live in the darkness, but no one longs for the light more than us. The evil in the world can't be completely eliminated, but we should never condone the existence of these evils and acquiesce to these evils to occupy our hearts. People are human. Because we are not beasts driven by our own instincts, we are guided by our own reason to do things that are in line with human ethics and in line with the light. Danzo, whether it is you or Root, you have completely become the slaves of the darkness in your heart. I don't think you are allowed to continue to threaten the freedom and life of more people in Woodleaf. Chapter 331. Watergate's speech was particularly impassioned, coupled with his handsome face and amiable posture. Even if people don't like such a slightly chinibu and righteous speech, they still have a certain degree of intimacy with Watergate's words in their hearts. After all, people still prefer such people and things that are full of righteousness. Kid, you're too noisy. Listening to Watergate's words, Danzo had a look of disdain, because Watergate's current appearance is exactly the same as Yuan Fei, who defeated him and became the 3 generations Hokage. That's the only time you can say such pretty words. Who doesn't know how to say such words without any basis, but just to make people feel comfortable? But when you really face all kinds of difficulties in life, these beautiful words are useless. Today, Root indeed fell in your hands, but without Root, Woodleaf will once again establish a department that is no different from Root, because the existence of Woodleaf can't be without the support of Root. Listening to Danzo's words, Watergate had an inexplicable feeling in his heart. Bad. This guy's going to escape. This was the first thought that appeared in Watergate's heart. Since he had a premonition of this possibility, Watergate naturally made a prompt decision and said to the many ninjas behind him, "Everyone, get ready to launch an AoE attack within 100 meters of Shimura Danzo. Shimura Danzo must not be allowed to leave Woodleaf and endanger the entire ninja world." The ninjas who followed Watergate to Root's base for the extermination plan were naturally experienced ninjas. After listening to Danzo's words, they immediately reacted that Danzo was going to escape. After receiving Watergate's order, without the slightest hesitation, the ninjas who followed Watergate began to use their best AoE ninjutsu to attack. And the ninjas of Root also rushed in front of Danzo to ensure the safety of Danzo's escape. Above the sky, a dazzling light sputtered out from the collision of ninjutsu, and Danzo also slowly moved his figure to a shadow. Just as he was about to escape, a voice sounded in Danzo's ear. "Shimura Danzo, I clearly promised you that I won't kill you. Why did you choose to stand on the opposite side of Woodleaf? If that's the case, then all the promises I've made just now will no longer be effective. I will do everything in my power to kill you right here." The person who spoke was naturally the 4th Hokage, Watergate. Danzo glanced at the weeds at his feet that didn't look so conspicuous. Presumably, this Kanai was deliberately left behind by Watergate when he was fighting with the rotten meat behemoth to prevent Danzo from suddenly retreating. To be honest, I really admire your ability, Minato. If it was possible, I would have accepted you as my disciple in the first place. But nothing is possible. Perhaps you and I are destined to walk on 2 opposite paths, gradually drifting apart. Today, I will leave Woodleaf unscathed, and you will be ready in Woodleaf, waiting for the day when I make a comeback. I will be the next Hokage of Woodleaf. Danzo didn't hide his desire for the position of Hokage, but Watergate didn't take it to heart. After all, Danzo was old and muddle-headed. His strength must be far from his peak state. On the other hand, his body was strong, and his strength was improving all the time. He could end Danzo's life now, so wouldn't his threats and ambitions be useless? These words, I'll leave them for you to think about in your dreams in hell. Watergate directly changed his right hand into a claw and fiercely pressed down on Danzo's abdomen. A blue chakra ball also formed in the palm of Watergate's right hand. Watergate thought that Danzo would try his best to avoid his attack, but Danzo didn't seem to have the intention to avoid it at all. Seeing that the Rasengan had already fallen on Danzo's body, but the scene of the chakra twisting Danzo's abdomen and Danzo flying because of the huge force of the Rasengan didn't appear at all. The Rasengan passed through Danzo's abdomen like passing through air, and even Watergate's arm and body directly passed through Danzo's body because of inertia. At the moment when the Rasengan passed through Danzo's abdomen, Watergate immediately used the tip of his left foot to rub the ground with his right foot horizontally, and instantly turned his back to Danzo. Illusion? Watergate tentatively said to Danzo. After all, when he attacked Danzo with the Rasengan just now, it didn't feel real at all. In such a situation, the first thing that came to mind was an illusion. But as if to mock Watergate, Danzo slowly bent down and picked up the special kunai that Watergate had just quietly thrown here from the ground. He even played with it twice in his hand and threw it at Watergate. As soon as he reached out, the Watergate caught his kunai. There was a flash of confusion in his eyes, and at this time, Danzo's voice reached Watergate's ears. Do you think that I, who can touch real objects and even launch attacks, is a virtual image created by Jinjutsu? Half of Danzo's face was covered by bandages, but Watergate found that Danzo's tightly wrapped arm was trembling a little at the moment, as if he was suffering from some kind of pain. Didn't I just tell you? There are many things that can't be left there just because the owner died. What I just used is indeed a Jinjutsu, but it's a real illusion. For you, I'm indeed an illusion that can't be touched, but as long as I want to, I can be real. How about it? Did I make good use of this inheritance? Watergate could guess that the rotten meat monster was related to the cells of First Hokage, but Watergate had no clue about the current situation. He could only watch as Danzo slowly turned around and walked towards the depths of the jungle. Watergate didn't think of attacking Danzo's back while he was defenseless, but Watergate clearly saw the tender leaves of the grass around Danzo's feet directly passing through Danzo's ankle. Watergate wasn't sure whether his attack would work or not, but in the blink of an eye, Watergate also figured it out. He didn't come for Danzo, but for Root. Although some of Root's personnel may have left, it's a bit whimsical to think that they can make a comeback with only a few of them in Danzo. So, the most important thing for him to do now is to return to the battlefield behind him with many ninjas who are loyal to him and wipe out these Root ninjas. Chapter 332. On the other side of the battlefield, Nangongja looked at the ninja ghosts in front of him that had been cut black and blue, but they were still slowly crawling towards him. This was because Nangongja gradually realized that these puppet-like things with weak self-awareness seemed to have an extremely high affinity with the natural energy of the natural world. When he left wounds on their bodies again and again, and they consumed their own energy to heal quickly, this feeling was not so obvious. However, when the life force of these enduring ghosts was depleted, they seemed to instinctively start to absorb the natural energy from the natural world into their bodies to replenish the life force in their bodies. Unlike Minato Watergate, who was the fourth Hokage, Nangongja didn't have access to such information about the past Hokage, so naturally, he didn't know the mystery of the first Hokage's cells, but Nangongja himself can mobilize natural energy for his own use, and to a certain extent, he is even similar to the first Hokage, so Nangongja was very curious about the way these ninja ghosts convert natural energy into vitality. In the past few days, Nangongja had directly chopped 9 out of the 10 enduring ghosts in a meat paste that they could not recover from. He only left behind the enduring ghost whose face cloth had been cut by him. Then, he used the Heaven's Calamity sword to cut off the tendons of his arms and legs and break his spine. Even if he has a majestic vitality, such injuries are not so easy to heal. Subsequently, Nangongja began to constantly cut the ninja ghost's body and has been observing the process of a ninja ghost converting the natural energy in air into vitality in his body. Although there are still some doubts, Nangongja feels that he has touched the door a little. Just when Nangongja wanted to use the sword energy contained in his body to directly turn the ninja ghost in front of him into meat paste like his 9 companions. But at this moment, he saw a huge spherical storm formed by water and wind not far from him. This move, no matter how I look at it, it has the same effect as Watergate's Rasengan. It seems that Watergate used his Rasengan to develop a derivative ninjutsu. It should be said that he really is the fourth Hokage, Watergate. Looking at the magnificent scene caused by Watergate, Nangongja was slightly surprised. Then Nangongja looked at the dying ninja ghost under his feet, but at the same time, it was full of vitality. Didn't Mount Mayaboku also have a way to cultivate natural energy? Maybe Watergate has also started to touch this aspect of cultivation. Then there is no need to destroy this ninja ghost. Giving it to Watergate as a gift is also a good choice. Well, consider yourself unlucky. You can peacefully become an experiment material. But you should have lived such a life, right? It can be regarded as sending you back to your original life. After saying that, Nangongjia stabbed the sword in his hand into the ninja ghost's abdomen, and the sword tip directly penetrated the ninja ghost's lumbar spine. The ninja ghost's sense of pain is dull. Not to mention that after the lumbar spine injury, the instinctive pain has become even weaker, so the ninja ghost didn't make any sound. Instead, it looked at Nangongjia's sword and saw that it was getting closer and closer to Nangongjia's body, so it shouted excitedly. That kind of ear-piercing howl was so unbearable to Nangongjia's ears and directly showed a displeased expression. Noisy. After that, he released the internal energy in his body and sneaked into the ninja ghost's body through the sword, and when the internal energy entered the ninja ghost's body, it directly burst out. After all, the ninja ghost has a human form, and in many places it retains the characteristics of a human. Nangongjia's internal energy directly began to wreak havoc in the ninja ghost body, and countless tendons and blood vessels were torn under the effect of the internal energy. A very unnatural red color appeared under the ninja ghost skin, and even blood slowly seeped out of the pores. The originally pale and loose skin looked even more strange under the contrast of the red color. Because the tendons and blood vessels in its body were all torn, the ninja ghost finally lost the strength to bear its fangs and brandish its claws, and could only weakly be lifted up in the air by the sword. From time to time, blood would flow out of the ninja ghost's limbs and mouth and fall to the ground. If it was a normal person, they would have already died from excessive blood loss, but the ninja ghost's own life force saved its life. Nangongjia seemed to be very satisfied with the way he handled it, and slowly nodded to the half-dead ninja ghost, then jumped up and ran towards the direction of Watergate. Only 9 piles of minced meat and puddles of blood were left on the ground. The air was filled with the smell of blood, and even after a long time, it still didn't dissipate. Seeing Nangongjia walking towards him with his black shoes stained with meat and blood, Watergate didn't feel any shock. Instead, he looked at the half-dead ninja ghost that was lifted up by Nangongjia with the sword. Sure enough, are these also clones that Danzo used the first-generation cells to cultivate? Compared to the giant rotten meat beast, although these ninja ghosts seem to be a lot weaker, they have more in-depth research value. Watergate. This thing is very mysterious. It can actually absorb natural energy into its body and forcefully convert it into life force. I know that the Senjutsu chakra is practiced in Mount Mayaboku. After all, I also learned a lot about natural energy in Mount Mayaboku. I thought that it might be useful to you, so I brought it here to show it to you. In fact, when Watergate used the Odama Rasengan and Gamabunna's water blade to make the giant rotten meat beast disappear without a trace, he felt a little distressed. After all, this was the product of the first Hokage cells after the full research of the root. Although he denied using the first Hokage cells in such a way, since there is already a result, how can he refuse? Originally, when Watergate thought that he wouldn't get such an experimental material, his mood was still a little low. But when Nangongjia brought such a thing to him, he was still a little surprised. As for not being able to use human bodies for experiments, take a look at this thing. Its body was pale with a hint of red, and its skin was very loose. Some people would even believe that it was an evil spirit summoned from hell by a special ninjutsu. So why should he talk to such a non-human? He fed it well, and occasionally took some blood and cut it into pieces. Isn't that already a good deed? This is simply the best experimental material. Chapter 333. Although it was an excellent material, in order to maintain his image among the ninjas, Watergate didn't directly take the shinobi down. Instead, he looked at the heavily injured, enduring ghost with a compassionate expression and said to Nangongja with sympathy, "Nangongj, this ninja who looks a bit unusual must be a ninja who survived Danzo's cruel experiment. Since he was born in Woodleaf, then he is naturally a member of Woodleaf. As the Hokage of Woodleaf, I have the obligation to provide protection and treatment for this kind of Woodleaf ninja. Now that Danzo has been expelled, this ninja will be a member of Woodleaf from now on. You put him down first, I will send someone to treat him." After that, Watergate waved his hand and called two of his direct umbu to stand in front of Nangongja. It seems like they wanted to take the shinobi down from Nangongja's sword. But Nangongja's expression wasn't so good at the moment, because when Watergate mentioned Danzo, he didn't use the word exterminate or imprison, but expel. Doesn't that mean that Danzo has safely left Woodleaf? This is a bit inconsistent with my purpose, as if he saw Nangongja's thoughts. Watergate walked forward and patted Nangongja's shoulder. With his usual warm smile, he said to Nangongja, "Don't worry, Danzo has suffered heavy losses this time. 80% of his men are hidden in various bases in Woodleaf. Our attack this time was very sudden, so a lot of important information and materials were not transferred out. So it can be said that the root has not been completely eradicated. There are only a few of them left. Whether it's you or me, it's easy to deal with them. Why are you so worried about Danzo's life? You and your family are safe now." Although Watergate's expression looked very gentle, the hand that patted Nangongja's shoulder contained a lot of strength. As Watergate spoke, the strength in his hand increased. In the end, although Nangongja didn't have any reaction, some of the dust under Nangongja's feet jumped slightly because of Watergate's strength. Nangongja's mood at the moment could be said to be terrible. As expected, no one in a high position would care about the promises between each other. As long as he achieved his goal, it wasn't impossible to turn his back on him. He waved the sword in his hand slightly forward. The tip of the sword that passed through the ninja's body was directly pointed at Watergate's nose. The two umbu, standing next to Watergate and Nangongja, directly took out their kunai from their ninja bags and pointed it at Nangongja. The ninjas under Watergate who were cleaning the battlefield also stopped their movements and looked at Nangongja closely. As long as Nangongja did anything that could threaten Watergate's safety, they would immediately swarm him. "Minato, you've finally cleared all the obstacles in front of you. Without Sandaime, without Danzo, a mere elder group is nothing more than a paper doll in your eyes. You can play with it however you like. I, Nangongja, congratulate you with this gift." Then, Nangongja fiercely waved the sword in his hand. The ninja that was pierced by the sword was directly thrown to the ground, creating a cloud of smoke. The sound of the sword cutting through the air and the slightly silver-white sword mark left in the air was so eye-catching. Obviously, Nangongja's mood was not so good at the moment. Watergate was not affected by Nangongja's mood at all. He still had a smile on his face as he stretched out his hand and disturbed the sword mark left by Nangongja in the air. He seemed to be very happy that Nangongja could congratulate Nangongja. Then, he used his eyes to signal his subordinates to carry the fallen ninja away. Nangongja looked deeply at Watergate. He didn't even have the mood to say goodbye. He directly turned and left the battlefield in the direction of his home. Looking at Nangongja's back, Watergate's chief strategist, Shikakanara, slowly walked to Watergate's side. He lowered his voice and said to Watergate, "This Nangongja is still the same as before, solitary and unruly. He doesn't have the slightest sense of belonging to the Woodleaf. This time, we didn't do as he wished. Maybe in his heart, he has already started to resent us. If necessary, I can bring a team of elites to deal with him. Although he is still strong, I am confident that I can deal with him." Shikakanara, who originally looked a bit ferocious because of the several scars on his face, had a fierce look in his eyes at this moment. He looked even more terrifying. Shikakanara's meaning was naturally very clear. Nangongja was an overly sharp weapon. Now that the weapon has developed hatred, as a ninja of the Woodleaf village, Shikakanara felt that it was necessary to destroy this resentful weapon. Watergate heard Shikaka Nara's words, but he didn't react. He just turned around and looked at Shikaka Nara's eyes. He put his hands on Shikaka Nara's shoulders and stared at Shikaka Nara's eyes. He slowly said, "Shikaka Nara, I'm indeed not as good as you when it comes to strategizing. But when it comes to controlling people's hearts, you're still not mature enough. Indeed, Nangongzhe is an overly sharp weapon. But why can't we be the ones to control this weapon? Nangongzhe is indeed strong enough, but his concerns are too obvious. As long as these concerns still exist, this sharp blade has a scabbard. As long as we have the scabbard in our hands, why should we be afraid that we can't use the sharp blade?" After saying this sentence, Watergate directly walked past Shikaka Nara's side and began to walk to the place where the ninjas gathered in this battle. He maintained a half heartache and half relief smile while comforting those injured ninjas. Looking at Watergate's actions, even Shikaka Nara, who has always been as wise as an abyss, felt a chill in his heart at this moment. Since when has the position of Hokage been held by a person without scheming? Nangongzhe, at this moment, was standing on a branch overlooking the battlefield from a distance. His eyes were cold. If Shikaka Nara was here, he may be very surprised to find that the look in Nangongzhe's eyes at this moment was so similar to the look in Watergate's eyes. "Watergate, we still don't know who is the one holding the sharp blade." After he finished speaking, Nangongzhe turned around and left the branch he was standing on, disappearing without a trace. Chapter 334. When Nangongzhe stood in front of his house, the sky was already bright. Although the sun had not directly revealed itself, a beautiful white color had already appeared in the eastern sky. Nangongzhe's house was slightly away from the downtown area of Woodleaf Village, so there was still a large area of forest around it. The slightly cold morning air and the humid atmosphere in the forest combined to form a thin layer of mist that shrouded the earth, looking exceptionally gentle. Gently pushing open the door of his house, Nangongzhe did not want to disturb the rest of the girls at home. The wooden door that was painted with a layer of paint was slowly pushed open by Nangongzhe's palm. Nangongzhe also walked a few steps into the entrance of his house. Quietly taking off his coat and shoes, Nangongzhe walked into the living room of his house. To Nangongzhe's surprise, the girls in his house were actually sitting in the living room. Whether it was little Linger, who loved to sleep in, Nangongro, and Mishiro, who usually woke up early to make breakfast for everyone, their eyes were slightly bloodshot at this moment. Their eyes were still a little tired from staying up late. When they saw that Nangongzhe was on duty, they quietly hid it. The faces of the three girls immediately changed into warm smiles as they looked at Nangongzhe. The three girls and Nangongzhe looked at each other for a long time. Finally, Mishiro seemed to feel that it was inappropriate, so she slowly stood up, tidied up her clothes, and said to Nangongzhe, "Last night, I was busy last night. I was busy all night last night, and only just came back. I've already cooked porridge. It should be time to eat now. I'll go get a bowl for you. After eating some porridge, you should rest well too, Gong Gong." As she said that, Mishiro walked to Nangongzhe's side and naturally took the robe that was stained with blood from Nangongzhe's hands. She also walked to the entrance and took Nangongzhe's dirty shoes to the laundry area. Obviously, she was going to tidy it up. From the beginning to the end, Mishiro did not say much, and Nangongzhe did not ask much either. After all, Mishiro was a top spy trained by root. As one of the participants of the plan, Nangongzhe naturally let Mishiro detect something. Not to mention other things, Nangongzhe had concealed his presence time and time again. Mishiro was completely aware of it. Before this operation, Nangongzhe had also collected a lot of information from the Blood Garment Pavilion. Mishiro had been helping Nangongzhe manage the affairs in the Blood Garment Pavilion for all these years, so she naturally knew a lot about these things. She watched as Mishiro went to the kitchen to get porridge for Nangongzhe. Nangongro also carefully looked at Nangongzhe's body. She did not find any injuries on him, so she did not say much and walked to her bedroom. It seemed like she wanted to catch up on some sleep. After the two older sisters left, little Linger relaxed a little. She affectionately pulled Nangong's arm and let Nangong sit beside her. Brother Nangong, are those guys from Root very powerful? Little Linger really wants to hear the story of you fighting with those bad guys from Root. Can you tell Little Linger about it? Xiaoling Air's pair of watery eyes stared at Nangongja. Nangongja couldn't resist for a moment. Therefore, Nangongja decided to tell Xiaoling Air everything that he knew about this matter to an unrelated person like Xiaoling Air. Then, are we safe from now on? After listening to Nangongja's explanation, Ling Air's eyes flashed with an inexplicable light. She asked Nangongja, "What's the matter?" Nangongja explained a lot about this operation. She learned about the destruction of Root and the escape of Danzo. That's right. At least we're safe in Woodleaf. The current Hokage of Woodleaf, Watergate, has a good relationship with me, so with him looking after us, we won't encounter the same dangerous situation as before. Nangongja did not tell Little Linger about the schemes between him and Watergate, because these small schemes could not change the fact that Watergate and Nangongja needed each other's help. Even in such a relationship, Minato was still in a relatively weak position, because Minato had been tightly locked by Konoha, and Nangongja not only held the power of the Blood Cloak Pavilion in his hands, but he also didn't have much control over such power. Then, Little Linger, can Brother Nangong promise me one thing? Looking at Nangongja, Little Linger said timidly to Nangongja. Little Linger was usually a carefree girl. She usually said whatever she wanted to say, but now her timid appearance really made Nangongja feel very fresh. It was just like when she left the village with Nangongja. Little Linger was full of fear for the future. Nangongja felt that he might know what Little Linger wanted to ask of him. So he gently placed his hand on Little Linger's head and gently stroked her beautiful hair with the bell ornament. Little Linger, tell me, now that everything is basically settled, if you have anything you want to do, Brother can go with you. Perhaps because of Nangongja's attitude, Little Linger, who was originally a little nervous, slowly calmed down. Little Linger's eyes contained a rare bit of heaviness and sorrow. Grandfather has been gone for many years, but I have never had the time to go back and see him. When you were in the Blood Cloak Pavilion, you also sent some subordinates to dig up Grandfather's grave, but because of various things, there was no way to personally pull out a weed or light an incense for Grandfather's grave. So, I actually just want you to come with me to the village where I used to live and visit my grandfather's grave. After hearing Little Linger's words, Nangongja also remembered that when he was seriously injured and on the verge of death, Mishiro carried him through the forest with great difficulty. Fortunately, they met Ah Wang, and he was able to receive treatment in time to save his life. When it was time to leave, Ah Wang knew that he was nearing the end of his life, so he entrusted Little Linger to him. With that said, Nangongja also wanted to see the last traces left behind by Ah Wang in this world. Chapter 335. After agreeing to Lil Ling Er's request, Lil Ling Er was finally satisfied as she ran back to her room to catch up on her sleep. However, even the dullest person would be able to sense the joy in Lil Ling Er's heart. Nangongja's greatest wish was for his family to be happy. Nangongja stood up from the cushion he was sitting on and slowly walked into his kitchen. Mishiro was currently holding a small dish in her left hand and a spoon in her right hand. It seemed like she was trying out the final taste of the kanji she made. Mishiro naturally heard Nangongja's movements, but Mishiro still didn't turn his head. It was unknown whether he was looking at Nangongja or the pot of kanji in front of him. Originally, I didn't want Rower and Little Linger to know that you participated in such a dangerous plan, but I was still worried about you. I wanted to personally see you return home, so I sat in the living room and didn't go back to rest. However, Rower and Little Linger are a group of mischievous people. They immediately saw through the whole story and insisted on waiting with me for you to come back. After waiting for an entire night, the two of them must be exhausted. Mishiro turned around and placed the dish in front of Nangongja. He smiled faintly at Nangongja and said, "Do you want to try to see if it suits your taste?" Looking at the dish that was still steaming, Nangongja gently blew on it. He reached out to take the dish from Mashiro's hand and placed it next to his mouth. Seeing Nangongja's action, Mashiro suddenly smiled gently. He gently tapped Nangongja's forehead with a finger and said to Nangongja with a doting tone, "Are still as catty as ever." When Nangongja heard Mashiro's words, he wasn't shy at all. Instead, he felt proud and said to Mashiro, "Isn't that because of Mashiro's superb cooking skills? That's why a picky guy like me can eat what I like every day." Mashiro looked at Nangongja's face and said to Nangongja with a hint of reminiscence, "Back then, I definitely didn't expect that I would become such a person. Back then, it was the first time I left Ruth's cage and was sent to spy on you. Back then, I didn't have any common sense and even foolishly allowed you to take advantage of me. But it was also the cold and indifferent you that slowly made me feel the taste of home. You made me slowly turn from a tool that was deliberately cultivated to a person who could feel at ease around the stove every day." Mashiro slowly placed the spoon in his hand on the table beside him. He reached out his hand and gently caressed Nangongja's face. He used his fingertips to feel the wrinkles on Nangongja's face. With a bit of warmth to the touch, Mashiro instantly felt that her heart was at peace. Even if his hand was caressing the man who had accompanied him for many years and allowed him to slowly grow up, Mashiro's heart didn't have any meaningless feelings at all. Instead, he felt a little heartache for this man, because although Nangongja's face still looked young and handsome, compared to the first time he saw Nangongja, the tiredness in his eyes was so strong that it was difficult to ignore. Mashiro's eyes were filled with undisguised heartache. Nangongja naturally saw it clearly. "You don't have to say that. At that time, I also left with Leaf for various reasons and accepted the seemingly absurd and strange task of traveling around a ninja world with you. At that time, I was just like an injured beast, eager to leave the place I originally lived and avoid the people I knew. But it was because I met you at that time that I mustered up the courage to face all the things I should face. At that time, if it wasn't for you, I would have already lost my life in that jungle. It was you who brought me to find a Wang and gave me a chance to continue living. So, there is no so-called debt between you and me. From the moment you saved my life, you're already my family. For my family, I'm willing to face anything, no matter what." Nangongja and Mashiro's eyes collided at this moment. The strong friendship in their eyes couldn't be ignored, but Mashiro suddenly moved his eyes away. He picked up the spoon again. His eyes were a little evasive. He used the spoon to point at Nangongja's taste dish and said, "The taste is okay, right? If it's okay, I will give you a bowl first. After eating, go and have a good rest. After all, you should have experienced a lot of dangerous things last night." Nangongja's expression was a little sluggish, but he still said to Mashiro, the taste is very good. I can definitely sleep well after eating the porridge." Mashiro took out a wooden bowl from the cupboard and gave Nangongja a bowl of porridge. He scattered a little bit of seaweed and sesame seeds on the porridge, making the porridge look more delicious. Without waiting for Nangongja to say anything, Mashiro turned around and walked away. Looking at Mashiro's back, Nangongja wanted to say something, but he still closed his mouth. After all, inviting Mashiro, himself, and Little Linger to visit the grave of Wang, who once saved them and had a close relationship with the three of them, wasn't in a hurry to inform Mashiro. After all, there were still some things that needed to be prepared. Right now, his relationship with Watergate was superficial. If he brought Little Linger and Mashiro to the village, leaving only Nangongja and the Woodleaf, Nangongja wouldn't be so relieved. But he called Mashiro because when he was entrusted to take care of Little Linger, Mashiro was at the scene. Why would he call his sister? In order to thank Wang for saving his brother, so that he could continue to live with his brother. Needless to say, this reason did have some credibility. With his imagination running wild, Nangongja held the wooden bowl in his hand and sat on the cushion where he was sitting before. He slowly ate. Behind a wall that Nangongja couldn't see, Mashiro was leaning against the wall. His cheeks were blushing like rouge. Listening to Nangongja's praise from time to time, while eating the porridge, Mishiro's blush became even more conspicuous. Chapter 336. A few days later, Xianxia found an opportunity to tell Mishiro that he had promised little Linger that they would visit Ao Wang's tomb together. Mishiro was naturally very grateful to Xianxia for saving Ao Wang when they were in trouble. Therefore, he gladly agreed to Xianxia's invitation. Because he was worried about his sister's safety in Wood Leaf Village, Xianxia actually went to look for Xianxia. However, Xianxia didn't seem to want to visit Ao Wang's tomb with little Linger and Mishiro, so she made some excuses. Xianxia also couldn't force his sister to visit Ao Wang's tomb with him. Therefore, Xianxia found the people from the Bloodcloth Pavilion in Wood Leaf Village and directly gave them the highest level of protection. If there were any abnormalities, they could directly notify Xianxia through the Bloodcloth Pavilion channels. After making these arrangements, Xianxia's heart was a little relieved. After greeting Watergate and pretending to be polite for a while, he directly left Wood Leaf Village with little Linger and Mishiro. The village where little Linger and Ao Wang originally lived in wasn't that close to Wood Leaf Village. In order to take care of Mishiro and little Linger's speed, Xianxia also restrained his speed. On the road, the three of them walked for nearly half a month. In order to reminisce about the past, they even deliberately took a detour to the place where they had been before. Although Xianxia didn't understand this kind of sentimental behavior, since it was the request of the two girls, he naturally didn't have any objections. Looking at the familiar forest and road along the way, Xianxia also became a little girl like Mishiro and little Linger. Looking at the surrounding environment, there was a little bit of sunset in the west sky. Xianxia waved at Mishiro and little Linger and said, "Let's rest for a while. Let's all rest for a while." I looked around and felt that we should be able to reach Xiao Ling Air's village tomorrow. Let's rest here for today and set off tomorrow morning. Mishiro and little Linger also looked at the sky and knew that it was indeed time to set up camp and rest. Thus, they nodded and walked to where Xianxia was standing. They seemed to be very familiar with the most basic things like setting up a tent. The few of them were already very familiar with the process, and naturally, they finished setting up the camp quickly. They even started a bonfire to make food and drive away the beasts that might be lurking around the camp at night. Although to Xianxia and the others, beasts weren't anything threatening, it was still quite annoying to have a beast come out to disturb them while they were sleeping soundly. The slightly orange-red flames of the bonfire danced on the wood, as if a female singer in a red dress was dancing gracefully. It had a natural beauty. Instead, she had a feeling of escaping. As time passed, this feeling became more and more intense. Don't be afraid. Little Linger could feel the corners of her eyes turning moist. Her legs were also slightly trembling. Suddenly, a gentle voice sounded in little Linger's ears. Xianxia was still looking at the dancing flames above the bonfire. However, little Linger knew that the person who spoke was definitely her brother Xianxia, who had accompanied her for more than 10 years. He had watched her grow from a child to where she was today. Trembling, little Linger inhaled a little of the cold air in the forest. Then, she probed Xianxia and said, "But," the hand that was originally on little Linger's shoulder lightly patted little Linger's shoulder. Xianxia finally turned his face to face with little Linger and said, "Don't be afraid. No matter what, aren't I and your Mishiro's sister still here with you? So little Linger, don't be afraid. Since you're here, you should do what you're supposed to do." Chapter 337. The night quietly slipped away from Xianxia and company's dreams. When little Linger opened her eyes, she discovered that her brother Xianxia was already packing their luggage. Sister Mishiro had already prepared breakfast and seemed to be waiting for her. Coming to visit her grandfather's grave was little Linger's own request. Although Xianxia and Mishiro were indebted to Ao Wang, the reason why they were able to sleep in such a remote place was because of her own request. Even if it was just this, it would not allow him to shrink back. I must face these things that I should face in the first place. Are you awake? Come on, it's time for breakfast. Sensing that little Linger had woken up, Mashiro revealed a motherly smile. She waved towards Little Linger and called Little Linger over for breakfast. Little Linger stood up and tidied up her sleeping bag. She sat beside Mashiro and began to enjoy some mushrooms and wild herbs that seemed to be found in the surrounding forest. Although the taste wasn't that pleasant, the smell of the mountain assaulted her senses. While eating, Little Linger looked at Nangong's busy figure and asked Mashiro, "Why is Brother Nangong still working? Did he eat breakfast?" Hearing Little Linger's question, Mashiro's face carried a trace of anger. She glanced at Nangongja and said to Little Linger, "You don't know. This morning before you woke up, your brother Nangong's gluttonous illness acted up. He directly shook me awake and insisted on having some mountain delicacies. Once this guy started to be gluttonous, there was no limit. He actually acted cute and pestered me. I really couldn't win against him, so I could only find some mushrooms and wild herbs to make breakfast. Perhaps to make up for his loss of composure this morning, he is currently packing our luggage." Although Jinbai's tone was full of complaints, Ling Er didn't feel that Jinbai was truly angry. Instead, she quietly moved her little mouth close to Jinbai's ear and used a voice that only the two of them could hear to whisper to Jinbai, "Sister Mashiro, you were so stubborn. This morning when Brother Nangong woke you up, pestered you, and annoyed you, you might have been happy. After being exposed by Little Linger, who was younger than her by many years, even Mashiro couldn't react in time." Her face turned pink. She lightly patted Little Linger's head and softly reprimanded Little Linger. "What nonsense are you saying? If you continue like this, then go and accompany your brother Nangong to pack our luggage. The two of you can wait for the food to get cold before you eat it." Hearing Mashiro's disguised threat, Little Linger quickly shut her mouth. Her cheeks puffed up, and she was like a little hamster as she quickly devoured her food. Although Nangong was also very envious of Mashiro and Little Linger being able to enjoy their food, he still happily watched Mashiro and Little Linger eating together. Although their age difference wasn't big, Little Linger and Mashiro's relationship was as warm as that of a mother and daughter. Breakfast passed in such a noisy manner. Nangong had just finished packing and received Mashiro's warm wild vegetable and mushroom porridge. At this point, there were almost no common roads. Most of the roads were man-made livestock or small paths that the residents walked on. After walking for half a day in the forest that was filled with shrubs and trees, Nangongja and the other two were still surrounded by green trees. They couldn't tell where they were at all. However, Linger, who had lived here since she was a child, clearly knew that she was about to reach her destination. Her originally heavy footsteps had unknowingly become light and graceful. Her footsteps were like a joyful jump. Little Linger directly overtook Nangong, who was leading the way, and walked forward. However, Nangongja frowned slightly because Nangongja could vaguely feel the excessive moisture in the soil and air. There were also some remnants of chakra. After careful observation, Nangongja discovered that this chakra was different from normal chakra. It was filled with a primitive and violent aura. If he had to find an analogy, Nangongja felt that only a chibi and Nine Tails chakra aura was similar to this aura. Was it tailed beast? Nangongja sensed something and quickly increased his speed. He pulled Mashiro and dashed towards the direction Little Linger was heading. Although Mashiro did not know why Nangongja was suddenly so anxious, he still followed Nangongja's pull and dashed towards Little Linger's direction. Soon, Nangongja and Mashiro left the dense forest. Bright sunlight and a wide space appeared in front of them. However, Little Linger was standing on top of a mound without saying a word. Even if she sensed Nangongja and Mashiro's arrival, she did not react at all. Because of the mound, Nangongja did not know what was in front of him. Thus, he let go of Mashiro's hand and walked forward to stand on top of the mound where Little Linger was. Looking around, the originally peaceful little village was no longer the same as Nangongja remembered. One by one, the wooden houses had already collapsed, and there were still huge holes in them. Although it seemed that a certain amount of rescue had been carried out, some of the puddles were still a little red with blood. Looking at Little Linger beside him, Little Linger's face was so dull, but drops of tears kept overflowing from Little Linger's eyes. Nangongja looked at Little Linger. His heart was also very sad. He stretched out his hand and hugged Little Linger in his arms, slowly stroking Little Linger's back with his hand. No, it's gone. Everything is gone. Why? Obviously, this place is so remote that it's meaningless to any country or village, but it's still invaded? Why? 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 In Nangongja's embrace, the grief that Ling had been suppressing all this while was completely unleashed. The mournful screams were like a sharp knife piercing Nangongja's heart. When did Little Linger become like this? No matter who it is, he must make them pay with blood. Nangongja quietly made such a vow in his heart. Chapter 338. While hugging Little Linger, Nangongja suddenly noticed a little movement in the forest on his left. After nodding to Little Linger and Mishiro behind him, Nangongja let go of Little Linger in his arms. The power under his feet instantly erupted, and his whole body was like a huge bird flying through the sky, rushing straight into the forest. After entering the forest, the obvious man-made traces on the ground became more and more conspicuous. However, Nangongja still had some doubts in his heart, because according to the usual behavior of a ninja, in such a place where there were no obvious paths and trees, one would generally rely on one's physical advantage and a certain amount of chakra's assistance to move between the branches. But now, Nangongja could see that most of the traces were on the ground, and they were very obvious. Obviously, they weren't covered up properly. This kind of trace didn't seem like the quality of a ninja, and it was very likely that it was left behind by an ordinary person. But considering the miserable situation of the village and the aura of the tailed beast, Nangongja felt that he shouldn't let down his guard, so he also took out the Heaven's Disaster Sword and its scabbard and slowed down his speed. While slowly moving forward, Nangongja's hand that was holding the Heaven's Disaster Sword's hilt also slowly became tighter and tighter. Suddenly, Nangongja suddenly pulled out his sword. The Heaven's Disaster Sword didn't leave its scabbard, but directly slashed towards a big tree behind Nangongja. After a moment, the big tree fell down, and Nangongja's figure was already standing behind the fallen tree. A man who looked to be in his 40s or 50s, wearing rough clothes, was sitting on the ground, paralyzed with fear. Although Nangongja's Heaven's Disaster Sword was wrapped in the scabbard, it was pointed directly at the man's throat. On the man's body, the hair on his body stood up. Obviously, even if the Heaven's Disaster Sword was dormant in the scabbard, it was still dangerous for Nangongja. The man's eyes stared straight at the Heaven's Disaster Sword in Nangongja's hand, and his eyes were a little numb. It was a kind of numbness that was filled with fear. The man's body was slightly trembling, and his mouth was muttering something. Nangongja tried his best to listen carefully. Finally, he heard what the man was saying. "Don't kill me, monster. Monster, don't hurt my family. I'll kill you. Fight, girl. What's wrong with you? Don't scare father. Open your eyes. Don't fall asleep. My home. It's gone. It's gone." Gradually, the man who was still staring blankly at Nangongja's scabbard held his head tightly, and the murmuring voice turned into a heart-wrenching roar. The kind of man who lost everything he cherished, who clearly hoped that he could accompany his everything to disappear, was lucky and unlucky to continue living in this world. Poor man. Different from before, Nangongja's heart quietly began to breed a kind of emotion called pity. Didn't he also lose everything he was familiar with? Although he was still young at that time, and might not have felt such strong emotions, he would have been driven by the strong desire for revenge in his heart. If he wasn't careful, he might have walked on a path of self-destruction. In that case, wasn't the seal that was engraved on his body a good way to maintain his original heart? Nangongja was actually very satisfied with the days he was living with his sister Nangong Ro, Mishiro, and Little Linger. The extreme emotions that he originally had, because he was deceived and coaxed, had already disappeared for the current Xianxia. Therefore, Xianxia was filled with sympathy for this man who had a similar experience as him and had already embarked on the path of self-destruction. Instead of letting him torture himself in the human world, Xianxia didn't mind offering his pity to this man. "Brother Xianxia, wait." Just as Xianxia unsheathed the calamity sword in his hand, Little Linger's voice sounded behind Xianxia. Obviously, she couldn't wait for Xianxia to return, so she brought Mashiro here. Little Linger. Seeing Little Linger walking over, Xianxia's eyebrows slightly knitted together. Because Xianxia didn't want Little Linger to see him killing people, he said to Little Linger in a serious tone, "Bring your sister Mashiro to the side first. I'll be done soon." After saying that, she looked at the pitiful and pathetic man who was immersed in his own world with a sharp gaze. "Brother, what I mean is that I might be able to get some useful information from him. He's a neighbor who often helped me and my grandfather when I was young." After this, Little Ling Air's eyes were filled with determination and sadness. "After this, I hope that big brother will be able to stop him from living such a painful life." Hearing Little Linger's words, Xianxia finally looked at the child he watched grow up. Unknowingly, Little Linger was no longer the little girl who only knew how to act coquettishly. Instead, she was a mature person who could make her own decisions. He nodded and made room for Little Linger. Little Linger walked to the man's side and slowly squatted down so that she could be at the same level as the man. Little Linger tried to make her voice as soft as possible, and at the same time, she used some of the illusion principles she learned in the ninja school. Finally, she opened her mouth. Uncle, I know that you're very sad right now, but you can't immerse yourself in sadness like this, right?" Little Linger's voice sounded very ethereal, as if it came from the end of the sky. However, after listening carefully, it sounded like she was whispering in his ear. It was this extremely conflicting feeling that made the man whose thoughts were in a mess at this moment, a trace of clarity appeared in his eyes. Chapter 339. I shouldn't be sad. The man muttered to himself. "No, my family, my home was destroyed. Why shouldn't I be sad? My home, my daughter. No. Although it didn't achieve the desired effect, there was no doubt that Ling Air's words had actually torn a small crack in this man's heart. As long as they used the right method to guide him, it wasn't impossible to make this somewhat crazy man reveal the information they needed. Looking at Little Linger, who was calmly observing the man's expression and reaction, Xianxia suddenly had a small plan for Little Linger's future. However, now wasn't the time to think about this. The most important thing now was to obtain some useful information from this crazy man. Yes, of course you can be sad, because you've already lost everything that you cherish. But is grief enough for you? Whether it's the death of your family or the destruction of your home, it wasn't because of you. It was because of something else, wasn't it? Are you really willing to let something like that go to another place and let others suffer the same pain as you? I know you're a kind person, but do you really want others to suffer the same fate as you? To have their families torn apart and their families destroyed? Following the man's words, Little Linger began to guide the man with her chakra-enhanced voice. She hoped that the man could recall the scene at that time. Even if it was just a few words, it could at least provide clues for Xianxia. I don't want to. This kind of suffering, this kind of sadness shouldn't exist in this world. Ugh. While speaking, the man suddenly grabbed his head with a pained expression. It was obvious that he was recalling the scene in front of his eyes when he was in the most pain. Don't panic. You are safe now. That monster has already left you. Now, he's an illusion. You just need to tell me, what did you see? Little Linger signaled Xianxia with her eyes. Xianxia slowly walked behind the man and pointed his index finger at the back of the man's head. He tried his best to make his internal energy gentle and infused it into the man's body, hoping that the man wouldn't fall into the fear in his heart. That's a huge monster. It's covered in spikes and looked very scary. But this monster seems to be afraid of something, and it's running away in a certain direction in terror. Perhaps it was because of the internal energy, or perhaps it was because of little Linger's guidance. Although the man's body was still trembling slightly, he was able to speak clearly. What do the characteristics of this monster have? Imitating the way little Linger guided the man, Nangongja also tried his best to make his voice as soft as possible and used his internal energy to simulate little Linger's voice. Seeing how easily Nangongja did it, little Linger wasn't too excited, because these things were actually written in the ninja school textbooks. If it wasn't for the fact that this man knew her and had a relatively good relationship with her, and that this man was mentally exhausted and broken due to excessive grief, this little trick definitely wouldn't have had such an outstanding effect. It looks like a huge tortoise, but it has 3 tails that are obviously different from a tortoise, and its shell also has many spikes. Tortoise 3 tails. Among the bijou, only one has such characteristics, and that is the Sambai Isabu that once belonged to the Mist Village. This bijou was originally used by the Mist as a means to deal with the wood leaf, and it was sealed in the body of Kakashi's teammate, Watergate's disciple, Noera Rin. In order to prevent Rin, who didn't have the qualifications to become a Jinchuriki and couldn't suppress the bijou in her body from being expelled to Konoha's territory, Hatake Kakashi personally used his own unique ninjutsu to kill his own teammate. Tailed beasts were creatures that could only be sealed, not destroyed. Although the Sambai shared some of the effects of Harano Rin's death because it was sealed inside her body, it was still resurrected over the years and became the only wild-tailed beast known to exist. In the information from the Blood Cloak Pavilion, the information about the Sambai ended here. Combined with some of the things that Kakashi said to him, Nangongja can probably determine that the Sambai has indeed been successfully resurrected. But this place is indeed very far from the place where Kakashi killed Rin. According to some records, the Sambai Isabu is not so willing to leave the place where it was born. You just said, this monster doesn't look like it's here to wreak havoc, but it's running away? As if he grasped the key of the problem, Nangongja continued to ask the man again. The man nodded a little woodenly, and then said, this monster is indeed running away. The scene is exactly the same as when I was hunting prey. Did you see clearly what the person who was chasing the monster looked like? Nangongja nodded, slightly confirming his inner judgment, and then asked. He was just floating in the air. With just a wave of his hand, the huge monster was sent flying. I couldn't see his face clearly, but he had very conspicuous hair, and he seemed to be wearing black with red patterns black. While talking, the man's eyes suddenly began to spin rapidly, and his heartbeat became very fast. In just a moment, the man had already fainted. It seems that his emotions were forcibly suppressed, causing his body to be unable to withstand such emotional suppression and self-protection. Looking at the man's situation, Nangongja also quickly said his judgment. Little Linger nodded, naturally knowing that Nangongja was telling the truth. With a little sadness in her eyes, as well as suppressed anger, Little Linger slowly stepped back. When Mashiro saw Little Linger coming over, he immediately took Little Linger's hand and walked to the other side, obviously wanting to counsel Little Linger. Nangongja naturally slowly unsheathed the Tribulation sword in his hand again. Chapter 340. When Nangongja once again stood in front of Little Linger and Mashiro, although there was no blood on his sword, there was still a very faint smell of blood. At the foot of Nangongja's shoes, there was some exceptionally moist soil that clearly wasn't from the surface. With a slightly inquiring gaze, Mashiro secretly glanced at Nangongja. Nangongja nodded towards Mashiro, obviously telling Mashiro that he had already dealt with the pitiful man. Looking at Little Linger, who was being gently hugged by Mashiro, although she was no longer crying, her shoulders were still trembling. It was obvious that her emotions weren't that stable. Nangongja helplessly shook his head. After all, these matters had to be resolved by one's own heart first. No matter how much others said, It wasn't as useful as thinking clearly on one's own. Who was he? Little Linger struggled out of Mishiro's embrace. Although she was slightly shorter than Nangongja, she still raised her head and looked straight into Nangongja's eyes. Her eyes were slightly red and swollen. It was obvious that Little Linger must have cried just now. However, Nangongja saw an extremely dense anger and unwillingness in those red and swollen eyes. Nangongja didn't wish to see such emotions in Little Linger's eyes. He had also been affected by such emotions before, so he was very clear about how dangerous such emotions were. Even if I tell you, what can you do? Walk in front of this person and offer up your life without any resistance. This was the first time Nangongja used such a tone towards Little Linger. Usually, Nangongja could be said to be extremely doting towards Little Linger. Sometimes, even Nangong Ro would ask Nangongja with a sour tone who he treated as a sister. However, now that Nangongja directly said such harsh words to Little Linger, it made Little Linger unable to react for a moment. Even if the price is my life, I will avenge my hometown. Although Little Linger was surprised, she still looked at Nangongja stubbornly and said such words. Nangongja's heart was suddenly filled with a kind of anger, and the blood in his veins flowed faster. Little Linger, no, Nangongling, do you think that your life is something that you can give up so easily? Nangongja took a small step forward, and the pressure that was hidden in his body was instantly released. Little Linger had seen Nangongja release his pressure to others more than once, but this was the first time she personally felt the full pressure from Nangongja. Although Mishiro, who was standing at the side, was not the main target of Nangongja's pressure, he was also affected to a certain extent. Mishiro, who did not have any cultivation, reacted even worse than Little Linger. Her face became pale, and her eyes were somewhat unfocused. Her legs were also slightly trembling. Little Linger also did not feel good at this moment. In her eyes, Nangongja was no longer the brother Nangong, who usually smiled gently at her. Instead, he was an executioner who emitted a thick and difficult-to-disperse smell of blood. Could this be the true attitude of her brother Nangong? For the first time, Little Linger understood that Nangongja's title of Yama was not given to her for no reason. Knowing that Little Linger and Mishiro were affected by his pressure, Nangongja felt that it was about time to release his killing intent and evil aura back into his body. Little Linger, is death really as fearless as you said? Nangongja walked to Little Linger's side and placed his hand on Little Linger's shoulder. He looked straight into Little Linger's eyes and said, "Although I have experienced many life and death situations and have taken many lives, I have never dared to look down on anyone's life. This is because I know that I'm also afraid of death. Death has always been a problem that humans have always tried to avoid. Many people say that they are not afraid of death. For their own ideals, for their own perseverance, they're willing to die. However, when death really came to a person, that kind of instinctive fear was something that couldn't be resisted at all. The reason why I am so angry this time is not because you are obsessed with seeking justice for the destruction of your hometown. It is because you view your life so lowly. You have never been alone. You have me, your sister Rower, and your sister Mishiro by your side. We have always been concerned about you. If you were to throw away your life so easily, have you thought about how much pain we would feel in our hearts? Indeed, you have grown up and have a certain level of judgment and execution. However, the relationship between people wasn't something that one could have a deeper understanding of just by age alone. This time, my actions were a little rough, but I hope you can understand that since I've already seen you as a mature person, then in the future, I will not give you endless tolerance. Instead, I will reprimand you should accept it." After speaking, Nangongja directly walked past Little Linger's figure and headed towards the ruined village. Mishiro also seemed to have recovered from Nangongja's rough coercion. She slowly walked to Little Linger's side and placed her hand on Little Linger's head. Then, she slowly embraced Little Linger. Little Linger, Miyagi's words were indeed a little overboard. However, I think that with your intelligence, you should understand, right? If it wasn't for Miyagi treating you as a family member and wanting you to grow up, he would definitely not show such an abnormal emotion, right? Mashiro and Little Linger had lived together with Nangong Zhe for so many years. Naturally, they understood that Nangong Zhe was usually a slightly dull and even somewhat taciturn person. However, this time, Nangong Zhe showed such a rare anger. This was enough to prove that Little Linger occupied an important position in Nangong Zhe's heart. Let's not talk about how Mashiro comforted Little Linger. At this moment, Nangong Zhe had already arrived at the ruined village. Although there was only a faint trace of chakra in the air, Nangong Zhe could still find some traces left behind by the use of ninjutsu. There were pools of water, ice shards in the corners of houses, and traces of sharp objects on the trees and houses. These were all important evidence for Nangong Zhe to judge the participants. Chapter 341. Although Nangong Zhe didn't agree to let Little Linger seek revenge, but Nangong Zhe was still very grateful to a Wang for saving his life. This village was the former residence of a Wang, and also the place where his bones were buried. The purpose of the three of them coming here was to pay respects to Ah Wang, but now they couldn't even find Ah Wang's grave. Nangong Zhe was also very angry and very sad. So this kind of thing must not be ignored so easily. Judging from the traces on the ground, the ninjutsu used by the two sides should include ice, water, and wind attributes, these three types of chakra. But these three types of attributes didn't bring about the effect of floating in the air like the crazy uncle said. From the information Nangong Zhe once read, Isabu was a tailed beast with these three types of attributes. So, can we assume that the person who forced Isabu to flee for his life didn't use any of these three types of attributes? Many people say that tailed beasts are actually monsters created by the self-consciousness of chakra, although there is no evidence to prove this point. But at least it shows that the use and control of chakra is much better than the average ninja. Relying on the attributes of a tailed beast to attack a tailed beast, how can such behavior be realized? And wearing black clothes with red lines on it. According to Nangong Zhe's knowledge, in the entire ninja world, I am afraid that only the Akatsuki, which has conflicts with him and also cooperates with him, and even the Akatsuki, which he planted a nail in his back. Fighting against a tailed beast alone, and even having the upper hand, such a person must be extremely famous in the ninja world, and only the Akatsuki can do such a thing and hide such a strong person quietly, without anyone knowing. Taking out a scroll from his arms, he directly tore it open. After a cloud of smoke rose, a black crow has already appeared on Nangong Zhe's shoulder. After Nangong Zhe whispered a few words to the crow on his shoulder, the crow directly turned into pieces of black feathers and disappeared without a trace. Seeing that the crow has disappeared, Nangong Zhe also nodded and returned to Little Linger and Mashiro's side. Brother Nangong, I was wrong. No matter what, I shouldn't take my life so lightly. But those people who have lived with me for many years and the place where my grandfather rested, all of them were destroyed because of the so-called monster and the godlike man floating in the air. I really can't bear this. After saying that, Little Linger also showed her strong unwillingness. Nangong Zhe naturally knew what kind of temperament Little Linger has. Perhaps after being persuaded by Mashiro for so long, she indeed gave up the impulsive plan of going alone to seek revenge, but she will absolutely not give up on seeking revenge. Well, you don't have to worry about these things. I have my own plans. I will certainly not let those unscrupulous people be so free. Even if there is no way to directly kill them, at least there is no problem in causing trouble for them. Nangong Zhe knew that he was going to face the Akatsuki. Although his strength has also reached the Kage level in the ninja world, but the people of Akatsuki also have their own unique skills, and their advantages are not inferior to the Kage level powerhouses. Of course, he can't just foolishly run up to them, so it seems that the only thing he can do is to cause trouble for them. Previously, the disciple of the Bloodcloth Pavilion who came here to remove the grave wrote the location of the grave in the report. It is a little far from the location of this village. If we are lucky enough, the grave of a Wang should be fine. Let's first go to the grave of a Wang, and then see how to take revenge for the people in this village. Okay? When Nangongzhi said that a Wang's grave may be fine, little Linger's eyes began to shine. Her grandfather's rest has not been disturbed yet. Little Linger's heart at the moment was filled with joy like wild grass. Obviously, she hoped that Nangongzhi can take her to see a Wang's grave. Walking to the side of Little Linger, Nangongzhi gently took Little Linger's hand and slowly walked with Little Linger in a direction. Mashiro naturally followed behind Little Linger and Nangongzhi, and with a little doubt, he looked at Nangongzhi, who was leading the way for Little Linger. Mashiro also participated in the management of the Bloodcloth Pavilion, and it happened that the report about a Wang's grave was actually from Mashiro's hands. Mashiro still had some vague impression about the records, although he didn't remember where a Wang's grave was, but he was sure that a Wang's grave was not in the direction where Nangongzhi took Little Linger. After walking for a while, whether it was the strong smell of blood or the scene of destruction in the village, they all disappeared without a trace, and it became the same as the forest they had been passing through, ordinary and without any special characteristics. A tombstone carved out of bluestone appeared in front of Nangongzhi and Little Linger. On the tombstone was written a Wang's grave, which was obviously a grave for a Wang who had never revealed his true name. Little Linger burst into tears the moment she saw a Wang's tombstone. She hugged a Wang's grave and cried nonstop while talking about her experiences over the years, repeatedly expressing her self-blame for not coming back to see a Wang. However, Mashiro quietly pulled Nangongzhi to the side and pointed at the grave that Nangongzhi called a Wang's grave. This isn't a Wang's real grave, right? What did you do? Nangongzhi pressed his index finger on Mashiro's lips, hinting Mashiro not to disturb Little Linger. He then lowered his voice and said to Mashiro, "No matter if it's the tombstone or the coffin, they all belong to a Wang. I also read the report about a Wang's grave. After confirming some things, I directly went to a Wang's grave and found that it was also affected and very miserable. Therefore, I immediately brought a Wang's coffin out and brought this tombstone here to be buried. It took me a lot of time to arrange such an old scene." After listening to Nangongzhi's words, Mashiro naturally understood that Nangongzhi did this to appease the hatred and anger in Little Linger's heart, which was why he did this extremely disrespectful act. Hopefully, one could also understand Nangongzhi's painstaking efforts. Chapter 342. In the end, after paying their respects to all Wang, Nangongzhi and the others returned to the Woodleaf. However, the three of them couldn't let go of the things that happened in Little Linger's village. Every time they avoided Nangongzhi and Mashiro, Little Linger would always be in a daze. No one knew what she was thinking. As for Nangongzhi, although he repeatedly said that he would take action, he didn't do anything at all. Little Linger naturally believed that Nangongzhi would do what he said, but believing was one thing. Nangongzhi's repeated delays made Little Linger understand the difficulty and seriousness of this matter. After returning to the Woodleaf, Little Linger also immersed herself in the public library of the Woodleaf to read a lot of information. She could also determine that the monster that escaped from the mouth of the somewhat crazy uncle was one of the 9-tailed beasts, Isabu. How could a person who could chase a tailed beast away be someone that could be easily dealt with? Little Linger even ran to Nangongzhi's side and told Nangongzhi that he didn't need Nangongzhi to seek revenge. However, Nangongzhi just smiled and shook his head without saying anything. Nangongzhi's stubbornness, or rather stubbornness, was something that Ling naturally knew very well. In order for Nangongzhi to avenge those who had already died and weren't close to her, she felt that it wasn't worth it to risk her brother's life. However, Nangongzhi seemed to be stubborn. He didn't even consider giving up. She didn't know if it was purely because of the destruction of the village or if there were other deeper reasons. In the middle of the night, The bright moon hid its appearance in the dark clouds. The originally cold moonlight was completely hidden at this moment. Xianxia, on the other hand, was neatly dressed and walked towards the forest outside Konoha. Although there was a barrier around the wood leaf, it was only designed to prevent ninjas from reaching Kagetir. At Xianxia's level, he could completely hide his whereabouts at specific nodes and not be discovered by the barrier. Xianxia was surrounded by tall trees. Because it was late at night, whether it was insects or birds, they seemed to have fallen asleep at this moment. The surroundings were silent. Xianxia could clearly hear his own breathing and heartbeat in his ears. Suddenly, a crow appeared on a big tree. The crow was very ordinary. Its feathers didn't reflect light, but its eyes were very unusual. This was because it had a pair of 3 Tomo Sharingan. Caw! 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 When the crow saw Xianxia, it made a very strange sound. Xianxia also nodded his head, as if to tell the crow that the surroundings were safe. The crow's eyes turned in a circle, then it directly spread its wings and flew down from the branch. Like sand being swept away by a gust of wind, the crow turned into a clump of feathers that far exceeded its original size. The feathers gathered in front of Xianxia, and slowly a human figure was piled up by the feathers. When the feathers scattered, a person wearing the Akatsuki's black robe with red clouds and 3 Tomo in his eyes appeared in front of Xianxia. These years, Itachi had been in the Akatsuki organization. As the Akatsuki organization's multifaceted spy to Woodleaf's relationship to Akatsuki organization, and Xianxia's relationship to Akatsuki organization, the huge pressure seemed to make Itachi's appearance more weary. Don't know whether it was an illusion or not, but Xianxia always felt that Itachi's eyes were not so bright, as if he was extremely tired. Now, is the time of trouble. You suddenly came to find me. I hope you are not looking for something boring. Itachi's tone was somewhat cold, but Xianxia was very clear about Itachi's situation. In the Akatsuki organization, there was a certain amount of suspicion towards Itachi. For a long time, the Akatsuki organization used Itachi as a knife in their hand and didn't let him come in contact with any of the Akatsuki organization's confidential information. Even if he accidentally learned some things, most of them were some unimportant or vague information. The Akatsuki organization also sent a lot of diversion to Woodleaf through Itachi more than once. Although it was true, it was not so important information. At the moment, Woodleaf was under the rule of the 4th Hokage, Watergate. The Akatsuki organization was the organization that once hurt Watergate's wife and children. Even before, in order to find information about the Akatsuki organization, Watergate even abandoned his responsibility as Hokage and directly ran to the ninja world to investigate for a period of time. It's conceivable that when Watergate knew that Woodleaf actually placed his own nail in this organization, how anxious Watergate's heart will be and how great the pressure on Itachi will become. Danzo has been expelled. Seeing Itachi, Xianxia didn't talk about himself first. Instead, he talked about the common enemy he had to face when he and Itachi reached an alliance. Your parents are safe now, and Sasuke has also left Woodleaf's range. Although you are now in Orochimaru's base, but considering your restraint on Orochimaru, it's easy to take Sasuke away. Don't you want to take your parents and brother away from the world and live a quiet life? At this moment, Itachi's face was still cold. That kind of cold temperament seemed to accompany Itachi since he was born. But Xianxia could clearly see the very obvious fluctuations in Itachi's eyes. For Xianxia's words, Itachi himself was actually moved. But soon, Itachi adjusted his mentality. After so many years of spy life, if there is really any significant growth in Itachi, I'm afraid it's only the effect of hiding his true feelings. I still can't do this. Itachi lightly shot a glance at Xianxia, as if he was looking at the devil in his heart, with both fear and a little bit of uncontrollable desire. If this matter could be solved like this before I joined Akatsuki, I would definitely abandon everything and live together with my family. But you have read some of the information I gave you. Akatsuki is not just an organization that wants to be the first mercenary organization in the ninja world. Although their conspiracy is hidden from me, I can still know that this is a terrible move that affects the ninja world and even the whole world. Before becoming Itachi Uchiha, I was a wood leaf ninja. Even if there's a crack on my forehead, I am still a wood leaf ninja. Itachi Uchiha. You're tuning in to the Eternal Immortal Ballad YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.